Welcome back, everyone, to Paranormal M. Tonight, we're going to listen to a few stories that people have shared, starting with one that sounds simple at first, but slowly becomes very strange. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel, and if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like. This first story is about someone who had the same birthday visit from their aunt every year, until one detail changed and made them look back at everything differently. So settle in, listen along, and let's start with the first story. I hope you all sleep well tonight. I've never really been the kind of person who posts things online. I don't follow conspiracy theories, I don't read ghost stories for fun, and I've never been someone who goes looking for strange things in the dark. But yesterday was my 15th birthday, and after what happened, I feel like I need to say this somewhere. I need someone to hear it. Ever since I was little, my aunt has visited me on my birthday, every single year. That part always seemed normal enough. Family comes over, people eat cake, everyone pretends time isn't doing its quiet little damage. But with my aunt, there was always one strange part. Every year, she would ask to spend 1 hour alone with me in her room. Exactly 1 hour. Not 50 minutes, not a little over. 1 hour. I used to think it was weird, but not in the way people might assume. She was never affectionate with me. Actually, she kept her distance most of the time, almost like she was afraid of standing too close. We'd sit there and talk about ordinary things at first. School, my mother, friends, whether I liked anyone. Then somehow, the conversation would always turn. She would start talking about deer, antlers, breath, long, soft sighs. I remember the sighs more than anything. The way she said that word made it feel heavier than it should have been. At the end of every hour, she would ask me to let her kiss my left cheek. She wore bright red lipstick, and it always left a mark. After that, we would open the Bible and read the part where Judas kisses Jesus on the cheek to identify him. Then we'd leave the room like nothing had happened. My mother would have dinner ready. We'd eat. They'd sing happy birthday. My aunt would say, "Goodbye, see you next year," and then she would leave. Except I don't think I ever actually saw her leave. I saw the door close. I heard the goodbye. But I never saw her walk down the hall or step out of the building. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know how it sounds. But it's true. Yesterday, the ritual happened again. This time, when she asked how I was, I told her the truth. I told her about a boy at school who had been saying horrible things about me. To my face, to his friends, behind my back. The usual kind of cruelty people call bullying when they want to make it sound smaller than it is. My aunt didn't react. She just looked at me and asked for his name. So I told her. That was all. She nodded, and we kept talking like normal. But when the hour ended, she didn't kiss my left cheek. She kissed my right. And this time, we didn't read from Matthew like we always did. We read from John. Not even the part about the kiss, because John doesn't tell it that way. I remember sitting there thinking how wrong it felt, like someone had moved one chair in a room I knew by heart. After that, everything went on as usual. Dinner, cake, singing, my aunt saying goodbye. The door closed. Then my mother got a phone call. The boy from school was dead. They said he'd had some kind of episode and taken his own life. At first, I couldn't connect it to anything. My brain just wouldn't let the pieces touch. I went to bed feeling sick and numb, and that was when I noticed the box sitting on my bed. It was wrapped beautifully. There was a note on top. For you, with love from your Aunt Zizi. Inside was a small white rag doll. It was covered in lipstick marks. Red kisses, over and over, pressed into the cloth until the white fabric looked stained and wounded. Today at school, A couple of my friends showed me a photo that had been passed around. I wish they hadn't. I wish I'd looked away, because the marks on him looked just like the marks on the doll, and all I could think about was that kiss. Judas's kiss. I want to tell you about something that happened a few years ago, back when my life felt pretty settled. My fiancé and I were only a couple of months away from getting married. I had a steady job, a comfortable place to live, and honestly, things felt good. We didn't have kids yet, so I still had plenty of free time. Around that time, everyone was talking about new games, and I was spending a lot of evenings relaxing, gaming, and enjoying the quiet before married life really began. About a month before the wedding, my mom called and asked if I could house sit for her. She had to travel out of state for a work convention, and she'd be gone for about 5 days. Her house was small, easy to manage, and all she really needed me to do was keep an eye on the place, take care of her 2 little dogs, take out the trash, and make myself comfortable. It sounded easy enough. At the time, she lived in a quiet retirement community. She was just old enough to qualify, so the neighborhood was peaceful most of the time. Still, there had been a few break-ins reported a couple of streets over, so when I packed for the stay, I brought clothes, my handheld gaming system, a console, and a pistol. I know that probably sounds like too much, especially for a retirement community, but I figured it was better to be careful. The first couple of days were honestly nice. I'd go to work, come back in the afternoon, feed and play with the dogs, grab something easy for dinner, and spend the night gaming or chatting with friends. When it was time to sleep, I kept the TV on because I've never been great at relaxing in someone else's house. Background noise helped, so I'd put on gaming videos or old comedy episodes and let them run while I drifted off. I slept on the couch in the living room, even though my mom had told me I could use her bed. There were 2 reasons I didn't. First, she used these homemade laundry products that had a really strong, sweet smell. I respected her choices, but the scent bothered my sinuses and made my skin feel strange. The second reason was harder to explain. I did not like her bedroom. From the first time she moved into that house, something about that room felt wrong to me. Not ugly, not dirty, not unsafe in any obvious way. Just wrong. I remember helping her build furniture in there once while she was painting in the kitchen with music playing. It was bright outside. The curtains were open. Nothing scary was happening at all. But the entire time I was in that room, I felt this heavy pressure in my stomach, like I was somewhere I shouldn't be. I kept brushing it off because my mom loved the house and slept in that room every night without any problems. So I told myself it was just me being weird. The layout of the house was simple. The living room was at one end, the kitchen was in the middle, then a hallway with the bathroom, and finally my mom's bedroom at the far end. From the couch, if I looked to my left, I could see part of her bedroom doorway. It was only maybe 20 feet away. For the first 2 nights, nothing happened. Then came the 3rd night. I got home from work, picked up a pizza, played games for a while, and talked to my fiancé on the phone. Later, I curled up on the couch with the dogs and put something familiar on the TV. One of those shows I'd seen enough times that I could fall asleep to it without paying much attention. I had placed my pistol under the cushion near my pillow, hidden but close enough to reach. Again, I know that may sound extreme, but with the break-ins nearby, I wanted it within arm's reach. Eventually, I fell asleep. At first, I had one of those vague dreams where everything is gray and muffled. But then the dream changed. Suddenly, I was back in my mom's living room, lying on the couch exactly how I had fallen asleep. I could see the kitchen. I could see the dining table. I could even see the flickering light from the TV. Everything looked clear, almost too clear. I remember lying there, wondering if I was awake or dreaming. Then I noticed the bedroom door. It was wide open, and there was a man standing in the doorway. He was just standing there, staring at me. I couldn't see his face. I couldn't make out clothes or features. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and unnaturally still. The best way I can describe him is that he looked like a pitch-black mannequin with a smoky darkness around him. Everything else in the room looked sharp and real, but he looked like a hole cut into the world. For a moment, I didn't feel afraid. I think part of my brain was still trying to convince me it was only a dream. Then I noticed the TV. The sound was clear. The picture was clear. It wasn't muffled like dreams usually are for me. I could actually make out what was happening on the screen. And then I felt my hand tighten around the pistol. I don't remember reaching for it. I don't remember deciding to move. I just suddenly became aware that my hand was already gripping it. The instant my fingers wrapped around the handle, the man charged. He sprinted straight toward me. Not around the hallway, not through the normal space of the house. He came forward so fast it felt impossible, like he was cutting through the walls themselves. In less than a second, he would have been right on top of me. I screamed. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I sat straight up and aimed the pistol toward the hallway. But by then, he was gone. Just gone. The bedroom doorway was empty. The hall was empty. The house was quiet except for the TV. The dogs had woken up and were looking at me like they had no idea what had just happened. I sat there frozen, heart pounding, arms still outstretched, trying to understand whether I had just dreamed it or whether something had really been standing there. After a while, I got up and turned on every light I could reach. I aimed down the hallway, even though part of me knew how ridiculous it sounded to point a gun at something that might not have been human. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was scared. My mom's bedroom door was open. I still don't know whether I had left it that way or not. I didn't go down the hallway. I couldn't make myself do it. I sat back down on the couch with the dogs and stared toward that dark part of the house for the rest of the night. I tried to let the TV distract me, but it didn't work. Every little sound made my nerves tighten. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember was waking up to my alarm at 6 in the morning. I didn't shower that day because the bathroom was too close to the bedroom. All day at work, I kept thinking about it. I kept asking myself if it had been a dream. Maybe it was. Maybe my brain had stitched together the house, the TV, and my discomfort with that bedroom into one awful nightmare. But it didn't feel like a dream. And the worst part was thinking about my mom living there. I was only staying for a few nights. She had to sleep in that house every day. For the last 2 nights, I kept every light on. When I got back before dark, I forced myself to go into the hallway and turn on the bedroom light too. Daylight made me braver. Not much, but enough. Nothing else happened. When my mom came back, I called her during my lunch break and told her everything. I described the man, the doorway, the way he ran at me, and how real it felt. My mom is religious, and she's always believed there are things in the world we don't fully understand. She took me seriously right away. After that, she contacted the woman who had owned the house before her and asked a few careful questions. That woman told her that she and her husband had lived there together. Then my mom asked if her husband had died in the house. The woman said yes. He had died in the bedroom. Apparently, it had been a sudden heart attack, a bad one. My mom was not happy after that. She had never seen anything herself, but she didn't like the thought that something might be lingering in her home. She didn't call an exorcist or do anything dramatic. She just prayed. A lot. That was her way of handling it. And strangely enough, nothing ever happened again. A few months later, I watched the house for her one more time, just for a day, and I didn't see anything. But even then, whenever I got close to that bedroom, that same heavy feeling came back. That same sense that I should not go in there. Eventually, my wife and I had our first child, and we moved to a larger place with some land. My mom sold that house and moved into a small place on our property so she could be close to her grandchild. Since then, there haven't been any more strange experiences. I still don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was a nightmare. Maybe I woke up halfway inside a dream. Or maybe there really was something standing in that bedroom doorway, watching me from the dark. I can't prove it either way, but I know how it felt. And I know I'll never forget the way that shadow ran at me. Hey, I want to share a story a good friend of mine told me. It's one of those tales that really sends a chill down your spine. It didn't happen to me, but I trust this friend completely. She's one of the most grounded people I know, no nonsense, so I believe every word she said. This took place late one night when we both worked at a nursing home. She went into a patient's room to give medication, but the moment she stepped into the doorway, she stopped dead in her tracks. The patient was sitting up in bed, but what caught her eye was that the patient wasn't alone. Sitting at the foot of the bed was this figure, completely cloaked in black. It wasn't human, that was clear. What's eerie is that both the patient and this dark figure turned to look at her, but she couldn't make out any facial features except for this enormous, unsettling smile. It freaked her out so much that she literally ran out and grabbed another nurse to come back with her. When they returned, the patient was still sitting up, but alone. The patient said something like, "You scared my friend. He's hiding in the closet." My friend didn't dare look in there. She thinks it might have been some kind of angel of death, because the patient was declining and passed away a few weeks later. It's a haunting story, and even after all these years, it still sticks with me. I'm 23 now, but this happened back when I was in 4th grade. And just to give you a little context, weird paranormal stuff wasn't exactly new to me by then. Before this, I'd already had a few strange experiences when I was living at my grandmother's house. Apparently, I had an imaginary friend there, except I don't actually remember having one. My cousins remember it though. They still tell me stories about how I used to make them play games with this so-called friend, and how badly it scared them. But I swear, I have zero memory of any of that. I do remember other things though. I remember my dolls turning their heads when nobody touched them. I remember seeing shadows move around. And I remember this one really unsettling moment when my late grandfather's favorite song randomly started playing on our old computer, while his ashes were sitting on the shelf right above it. As a kid, that absolutely terrified me. Eventually, my mom and I moved out of my grandma's house and into an apartment. She was a single mom, so it was just the two of us. We lived on the 3rd floor, and the apartment directly below us stayed empty the entire time we lived there. Maybe that didn't mean anything, but when you're a kid, an empty apartment under you feels like it has teeth. I didn't hate that place exactly, but it always felt off. The worst part was my bedroom. At night, I would see these pale, floating shapes drifting across my ceiling. They looked like soft white blobs, just moving slowly around up there. I know that sounds strange, but I'm only telling you what I saw. I was so scared that I kept running out of my room and crawling into bed with my mom. One night, she finally got tired of me taking over half the bed, so she decided to sleep in my room instead. And that was the night she saw them too. The same white shapes floating across my ceiling. After that, she contacted this woman my aunt knew. I don't really know what to call her. A spiritual healer, a medium, an energy reader, something like that. I honestly still don't know what her actual title was. But before she came over, she told my mom not to tell her anything about what I'd been seeing. She wanted to come in without knowing any details. Now here's the part that has stayed with me the most. A few weeks before that woman came over, I had a sleepover with 2 friends. I'll call them Jame and Jordan. They were twins. I was mostly friends with Jame, but Jordan always had to come along because their parents didn't let them go anywhere separately. The three of us were sleeping on my bedroom floor. Our heads were against the wall, facing into the room. Jame was in the middle, Jordan was closest to the door, and I was closest to the window. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up and opened my eyes. There was a woman standing in my doorway. Not a shadow, not a dream, not sleep paralysis. A woman. She looked like she may have been indigenous or Latina. Her clothes looked old-fashioned, almost like something from a very old painting. The kind of clothing you'd imagine from centuries ago. But the part I remember most clearly was her face. She was looking directly at me. She slowly walked from my bedroom doorway all the way across the room toward the window, never breaking eye contact with me. I just lay there completely frozen, watching her move. Then I squeezed my eyes shut as hard as I could. When I opened them again, she was gone. Fast forward to the day the spiritual woman came to our apartment. She walked through the whole place, burning sage, talking about the energy in the rooms, doing whatever it was she did. Eventually, the three of us ended up sitting on the kitchen floor. It was just me, my mom, and this woman. We were sitting there talking when, out of nowhere, the room started smelling absolutely horrible. And then this woman suddenly jumped up. She was clutching herself, panicking, and when I looked down, there was a puddle of liquid poop on the kitchen floor. I wish I was joking. This grown woman had literally had diarrhea right there on our kitchen floor. She ran straight to the bathroom while my poor mom was left cleaning actual human diarrhea off the floor. And I'm just sitting there, 10 years old, trying to process how the night had gone from spiritual cleansing to whatever fresh nightmare this was. A few minutes later, the woman came out of the bathroom looking genuinely shaken. And she said, "I saw it." According to her, while she was in the bathroom, she saw the entity that had been attached to me. I don't remember every single thing she said after that, because honestly, my brain was still stuck on the fact that she had just pooped on our kitchen floor. But I do remember one thing very clearly. She told my mom there was also a large cat protecting me. A black panther. My mom immediately reacted and said something along the lines of, "That makes sense. I've always prayed for a black panther to watch over her and protect her." And there was no way this woman could have known that. To this day, I still don't fully know what happened in that apartment. I don't know who I saw walking across my room. I don't know what that woman saw in the bathroom. I don't know why my mom and I both saw those white floating shapes on my ceiling. But I do know this. I'm 23 now, and I have a black panther tattooed on my arm. I got it when I was 17, and I have never regretted it for even 1 second. Maybe the whole thing sounds ridiculous. Maybe it is ridiculous. But whenever life gets heavy, or whenever I just need to laugh at how completely unreal that night was, I think about it again. Because honestly, what was that? And now this panther is right there on my arm, not hidden at all, so people ask me about it all the time. The tattoo is gorgeous, by the way. The artist did an incredible job with every little detail. But when people ask me why I got it, I usually just say, it's kind of a long story, but basically, it's my spiritual guardian. Because really, how am I supposed to explain the full version? Nobody is ready for the kitchen floor part. Hey, I want to share something a little strange that happened recently with my toddler, and honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So, you know how people often say little kids can sometimes sense things adults can't, like spirits or energies? Well, this morning I was putting laundry away in my little guy's room. His closet door was wide open, and I was facing it, so I couldn't see his window directly, but I could peek through the little gap near the door hinge. If I leaned in just right, I could get a pretty clear view of the space in front of his window. It sounds silly, but perspective mattered here. Anyway, as I was folding clothes, I started hearing giggles and the kind of excited cooing only a 1-year-old can make. Curious, I looked through the door gap and saw the curtain by the window move like someone was wrapping it around themselves, almost hiding. I got closer to the hinge and saw my son standing about a foot from the window, laughing and staring right at the curtain. For about 5 seconds, I watched the curtain shift again, wrapping like it was concealing someone. Then, my little guy walked right up to it. I turned away to hang more laundry, thinking maybe his older brother was playing hide and seek with him. They do that all the time. But here's the thing. When I finished, switched off the lights, and called both my sons to come out, I saw the 5-year-old sprawled on the couch, watching TV. There was no way he'd snuck out unnoticed, meaning my toddler was alone at the window the whole time. So, was my son playing with a spirit? Or was I imagining that curtain moving? I should mention there's a small fan running in his room 24/7, but it's nowhere near strong enough to move those thick blackout curtains like that, much less wrap them around like someone hiding. Plus, our house is fairly new, and no one's ever passed away here or nearby. I don't know what to make of it, but it's been on my mind. Maybe sometimes children do see things adults can't. Or maybe it's just one of those unexplained moments we don't have answers for. Either way, it's a story I'll keep close. I've kept this story to myself for a long time, mostly because even now, when I think back on it, I get that same tight feeling in my chest that I had that night. This happened about 7 years ago. I was walking home from my friend Mara's place after we'd stayed up way too late talking. It was close to 12:40 in the morning, maybe a little after that, and instead of taking the main road, I decided to cut through Briar Lane, this narrow, quiet stretch that ran alongside an old pasture. I'd used that shortcut plenty of times before. In daylight, it was nothing special. Just cracked pavement, a leaning fence, and a wide open field that always looked kind of silver under the moon. But that night felt different. It was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, more like the whole world had paused and forgotten to breathe. No cars passing, no wind moving through the grass, no crickets, nothing. About halfway down the road, I noticed someone standing by the fence at the edge of the field. At first, I thought it was just another person out late, maybe someone taking a walk or waiting for a ride. But the closer I got, the less sense that made. They weren't walking. They weren't shifting their weight. They weren't looking around. They were just standing there, facing me. I couldn't see their face. It was too dark for that. But I could tell they were tall. Not just tall in the usual way. Strange tall. Stretched tall. I tried to act normal. I kept my eyes on the road and told myself not to make a big deal out of it. Just keep walking. Don't stare. Don't let your imagination start building monsters out of shadows. But when I reached the spot where they'd been standing, I glanced over. They were gone. I stopped right there in the road. There was nowhere for them to go. The field was open, flat, and empty for a long way. There were no trees close enough to hide behind, no sheds, no houses, no dips in the ground. One moment they had been there, and a few seconds later, they weren't. I remember standing there with this cold feeling crawling up my back, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. I was tired. It was late. Maybe it had been a fence post, or a trick of the light, or my brain making something out of nothing. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Soft, but clear. Step, step, step. I turned around fast. Nobody was there. The road behind me was empty, and the footsteps stopped the second I turned. I waited, holding my breath. listening so hard my ears almost hurt. Nothing. So I started walking again. And the footsteps started again too. This happened more than once. I'd walk, and they'd follow. I'd stop, and they'd stop. Every time, the road behind me was empty. By then, I wasn't pretending to be calm anymore. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it behind me. The beam shook in my hand, but there was nothing there. Just the road, the fence, and that black field sitting quietly beside me. I started walking faster. The footsteps matched me. That was the worst part. Not that they were loud, not that they were running, just that they kept pace. Like whoever, or whatever, was behind me knew exactly how fast I was moving. I didn't look back again after that. I just kept going, telling myself that once I got home, everything would feel normal again. When I finally saw my house, I almost cried from relief. I hurried to the gate, fumbled with the key, got inside, and turned to close it. That's when I looked down the street one last time. Someone was standing at the far end of the road, completely still. Even from that distance, I could tell it was the same figure. Tall, thin, and darker than everything around it. Not standing in the dark, exactly. More like it was made from a piece of darkness that had peeled itself away from the night. I slammed the gate shut and ran inside. I barely slept. I kept telling myself there had to be a normal explanation. A real person. A prank. A strange coincidence. Anything but what it felt like. The next afternoon, I was outside when my neighbor, Mr. Callan, came over. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure whether he should say anything. Then he asked, "Were you out late last night?" I told him I was. He nodded slowly and said he'd been awake around 1 in the morning and had looked out his window. He said he saw me coming down the road. Then he asked, "Who was walking behind you?" My stomach just dropped. I hadn't told him anything. I hadn't told anyone. I still don't know what happened that night. Maybe there really was a person on Briar Lane. Maybe fear filled in the blanks after I saw something I couldn't explain. But I know what I heard. And according to my neighbor, I wasn't walking home alone. Hey there, I want to share a story from last fall that's stuck with me ever since. So, I'm an HVAC and electrical contractor, and I often work with realtors fixing up homes that are in escrow. This particular day, it was already dark by 4:30 p.m., which is typical for late fall. We were at this empty house. Lights were on, but no one was around. My assistant and I were there to replace the furnace. Right away, he mentioned feeling this strange, heavy vibe in the house. I felt it too, like something just wasn't right. The house was about 30 years old, in a pretty standard neighborhood in the North Valleys of Reno, Nevada. I remember saying a couple of times in the afternoon that I thought I heard footsteps down the hallway. My helper admitted he heard them too, but didn't say anything. As we wrapped up, he suddenly pointed down the hall. We both saw it, a translucent figure of a man, waist up only, walking into the front bedroom. It was so clear. My helper called out, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." We checked the room thoroughly, windows locked, nothing out of place. We looked all over the house, but we were alone. Needless to say, we packed up fast and called it a day. I don't think I've ever locked up a house that quickly. The next day, I called the real estate agent to let him know we finished and that the inspection was scheduled for the following week. I asked about the house's history. He told me the previous owner's daughter was selling the place. Apparently, her mother had passed away there that spring, and a few months later, her father took his own life in the bedroom. He then mentioned that his client had seen her father in the house while cleaning it out, and thought maybe she was a little crazy. I just chuckled uneasily and never told him what we saw. But sometimes places hold onto the memories of those who lived and left there. I still think about that figure in the hallway. Maybe it was just a lingering presence saying goodbye. I must have been about 10 when my mom took me into this little charity shop one afternoon. I remember wandering around, not really looking for anything, and then I saw it. A pale wooden rocking chair. For some reason, I was completely drawn to it. I know how that sounds now. A child becoming obsessed with an old rocking chair in a charity shop is already the beginning of a horror film. But at the time, I didn't think there was anything strange about it. I just wanted it. My mom bought it for me, and I was over the moon. My parents carried it upstairs and put it in the corner of my bedroom, and after that, I sat in it all the time. I'd rock back and forth while reading, while daydreaming, while doing absolutely nothing. My brother Jame wanted it too, but I'd seen it first, so as far as I was concerned, it was mine. A few weeks later, I went to bed like normal. Back then, I was scared of the dark, so I always left my bedroom door open a little. My parents would keep the hallway light on, and that bit of light would spill into my room. It wasn't bright, but it was enough that I could make out the shapes of my furniture. Sometime during the night, I woke up. At first, I didn't move. I was facing the wall, and I could hear this soft, creaking sound behind me. The rocking chair. It was moving. I thought it must have been Jame sneaking into my room to sit in it, because he was always trying to use it when I wasn't looking. So I said something like, "Jame, get out, I'm trying to sleep." No answer. Just that slow creak. Back and forth. Back and forth. I turned over, annoyed more than anything, and then I froze. There was someone in the chair, but not a whole person. It was just a head. A man's head. He had dark brown hair, brown eyes, and he was staring straight at me. Not blinking, not moving, just looking at me from the rocking chair in the corner of my room. I have never felt fear like that. I wanted to shout for my mom and dad, but nothing came out. My body felt locked in place. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even pull the covers over my face properly. I just lay there with the duvet up to my mouth, staring at him while he stared back at me. In my head, I started counting down from 10. I told myself, when I get to 1, I'm going to pull the pillow over my head. 10, 9, 8, all the way down to 1. But when I got there, I couldn't do it. So I started again, and again, and again. I must have counted down dozens and dozens of times before I finally found the nerve to grab the pillow, pull it over my head, and squeeze my eyes shut as tightly as I could. I didn't look back at the chair for the rest of the night. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember is waking up in the morning feeling completely wrong. Not ill exactly, just strange. Like something had shifted in the room, or in me. I told my parents what had happened, and they took the rocking chair out of my bedroom that same day. I was relieved, honestly. I never wanted to sit in it again. But the part that still gets to me happened years later. I was at my Nana's house, and we were going through some old family photographs. We didn't visit her house all that often, so I hadn't really seen many of those pictures before. I picked one up, and my stomach just dropped. It was him. The same dark hair, the same eyes, the same face I'd seen in that rocking chair. I asked who the man in the photo was. It was my granddad. I'd never met him. I'd never even seen a picture of him before. He died when my mom was still a teenager after taking his own life. After that, I didn't want to look through the photos anymore. Even now, I don't know what I saw that night. The thing that haunts me most isn't just that I saw him, it's that I only saw part of him. Not a shadowy figure, not a full body standing in the corner, not some misty shape. Just a head, sitting there in that old rocking chair, staring at me. I've heard people talk about ghosts, shadow figures, and things moving around at night, but I haven't heard many people say they saw only part of someone. And honestly, I still wonder about it. Was it my imagination? Was it a dream? Was it something else entirely? I don't know. But I know what I saw. Hey, I want to share a little story from when I was a kid, maybe around 9 or so. I was home alone one evening, sitting in our living room that kind of flowed into the kitchen. The TV was off, and I happened to catch my reflection in the dark screen. It was one of those moments where you look and think, wow, that looks kind of spooky. I was fiddling with a toy or something, completely absorbed, when the sun started to set, and suddenly it got really dark. All the lights were off, which was strange because there were usually 4 other people in the house: my mom, dad, older sister, and grandma. So it was never this quiet or dark. What I didn't know was that everyone else had quietly left the house without telling me. Then, out of the silence, I heard it. A slow, steady sound of high heels clicking on the floor, coming from the kitchen. The footsteps were deliberate and getting closer, louder with each step. It felt really eerie, like something not good was coming toward me. I was frozen for a moment, heart pounding, and then I just ran as fast as I could, up the stairs into the pitch-black hallway. The only light was sneaking out from under my grandma's bedroom door. Without thinking twice, I burst in and jumped into bed beside her, safe but still shaking. That invisible woman in high heels never came near me again after that night. Although, I swear, sometimes I'd hear soft singing through the vents later on, like she was trying to spook me in her own way. But that's a story for another time. I guess the best way to say this is, I think the house we moved into might be haunted. And I know how that sounds, I really do. I'm not saying that because I want advice, or because I'm panicking, or because I think I'm in danger. Honestly, I'm not even that scared. A little nervous sometimes, sure, especially when the lights are off and the house starts acting like it has opinions. But mostly, I'm just fascinated by it. We moved into this 2-story rental in early spring. It's not ancient or anything. It was probably built sometime in the 80s or maybe the early 90s. The place has that classic landlord renovation charm. Paint where paint should not be. Trim that gives up before reaching the wall. Window screens that fit like they were installed by someone guessing from memory. But overall, it's a good house. The appliances work. The electricity is fine, except for one flickering bulb I refuse to count as spooky evidence. The heating and air are fine. The water pressure is great. There's nothing dramatic in the house's history, at least not that I know of. I live with 3 roommates who I'll call Dev, Hallie, and Tay. Tay's cat moved in a few weeks after we did, and honestly, she has become one of the better witnesses in this whole thing. The weirdness started almost immediately. On our second day there, Tay and I heard what sounded like people talking downstairs. Not one person mumbling, a whole quiet conversation. At least 3 voices, low and hushed, coming from the kitchen area. Then we heard the garage door open and close. We thought Dev and Hallie were back from picking up more stuff from the old place. But when we went to check, the garage was empty. No car in the driveway. no people, no sign that anyone had come in. Then came the stomping upstairs. That was when Tay found this hidden attic entrance near the laundry area, and for a minute we both thought, absolutely not. We have squatters. The house is on the edge of a rougher part of town, the kind of area where most of the businesses nearby have bars on the windows, so it didn't feel impossible. We checked everything. Every room, every closet, every corner. The attic entrance didn't even lead to a real usable attic, at least not from what we could tell. It was more like a narrow, vertical wooden shaft going up toward the roof. Nobody could have been living up there. Nobody could have slipped in and out. I even put a camera in the upstairs hallway for a while, but it never caught anything. That same evening, my closet doors started opening and slamming shut by themselves. They're sliding doors, heavy and kind of stubborn on their tracks. There was no breeze. No one was near them. And they weren't just drifting open. They were moving hard, harder than I think I could have moved them from where I was standing. It happened several times over maybe 10 minutes, and then it stopped, like someone had gotten bored. For a little while after that, nothing major happened. Then one night, I woke up and my bedroom door was open. It hadn't been locked, but it had been fully latched. Everyone else was asleep. Nobody admitted to opening it, and honestly, I believed them. That happened once more later on. Around then, Tay and I started hearing the knocking. That's probably the most regular thing now. It usually happens late at night, somewhere between 2 and 6 in the morning. At first, we tried to explain it away as pipes, because that's what reasonable people do before admitting their house might be playing percussion. But we figured out the sounds came from 2 specific spots: the middle of the upstairs bathroom floor and the kitchen floor near the garage door. And it doesn't sound like pipes. It sounds like knuckles. A bare fist knocking on tile upstairs and on wood downstairs. I tested it myself, tapping the same way with my own hand, and the sound matched almost perfectly. The stranger part is that sometimes it seems to respond. I know how that sounds. But certain words seem to get reactions. The word ghost almost always earns a knock or two, which feels less like a haunting and more like someone interrupting a conversation to say, "Yes, hello, present." After that, the activity became a pattern. Knocking, doors opening or closing, sometimes softly, sometimes with force. Occasionally, it sounded like someone was walking on the roof at night. We checked the house. We checked outside. No sign of anyone. And sound travels so easily in this place that I really don't think a person could hide here without us knowing. Most of it happens around the laundry room, the kitchen, and my bedroom. My room is right next to the laundry room, with the bathroom on the other side. It's like the whole upstairs hallway is a little paranormal intersection. Then, a couple of weeks ago, it got stronger. By then, the cat was living with us, and she reacts to the noises too. That actually made me feel a little better, weirdly. At least Tay and I weren't just winding each other up. The cat will freeze, stare, jump, or bolt right when the sounds happen. I also started seeing shadows. Not often, just quick glimpses. Always upstairs in the hallway or downstairs near the kitchen. The upstairs ones seem to come from the bathroom area. They look tall but hunched, and they're never visible for more than a second or two. Sometimes I hear shuffling when they move. Downstairs, they seem to duck behind furniture or vanish near the tiny bathroom under the stairs. Tay may have seen one once too, though I'm not completely sure. Dev and Hallie don't notice nearly as much as we do, but Tay, the cat, and I have definitely had enough experiences to make the house feel very crowded for a place with 4 humans in it. What finally made me want to talk about it was what happened tonight. I was getting ready for bed and leaving the bathroom to go to my room. The hallway lights were off, but Dev had put these color-changing fairy lights along the little wall by the stairs, so it wasn't completely dark. I didn't see anything, but when I reached my bedroom doorway, I suddenly felt like someone was standing behind me. So I waved. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I figured if something was there, I might as well be polite. The second I waved, there was this loud grinding sound right in front of my face. It sounded like metal scraping against stone, except it came from empty air. Immediately after that, I heard footsteps running toward me. Fast footsteps. Human footsteps. But there was nothing there. The cat was about a foot away from me, and she bolted into Tay's room the moment the sound happened. The footsteps stopped right in front of me, and then nothing else happened. No figure, no touch, no dramatic movie moment. Just the house going silent again. So I went into my room and shut the door, because apparently that is who I am now. Something invisible runs at me in the hallway, and I just decide bedtime is still happening. For about 20 minutes after that, I heard shuffling and scraping right outside my door. The doorknob moved a little, but the door didn't open. I tried to record it, but every time I picked up my phone, the sound stopped. That has happened before. The second a camera comes out, everything gets shy. Eventually, I lay down and left my bedside lamp on. I wasn't terrified exactly, but the energy felt different. More agitated than usual. Before tonight, most of it felt startling, but not threatening. This felt like something had been annoyed by my little wave. I tried to convince myself the sounds outside the door were just the cat, even though they sounded more like feet and fabric shifting. I was about to turn the lamp off when I heard the same shuffling directly under my bed. I turned on my phone flashlight and looked underneath. Nothing. Just my toolbox, a keyboard, and an empty moving bag. No cat. Nothing moving. Nothing that could have made the sound. And of course, the noise stopped as soon as I tried to record it. Eventually, things quieted down, except for a few taps on the wall. But then my room got cold. Not slightly chilly. Cold. The thermostat said it was around 70, but my room felt closer to the low 50s. I had goosebumps, and the cold just stayed there. So yeah, I think I might live in a haunted house. I'm still not convinced it's evil. Annoyed, maybe. Restless. Frustrated. Maybe just dramatic and very committed to knocking. But not malicious. At least, not so far. And honestly, part of me hopes it really is paranormal. If it weren't for those closet doors moving the way they did, I'd probably still be trying to blame the pipes, the house settling, or the cat being chaotic in ways unknown to science. But deep down, I feel like something is here. And strangely enough, I don't think I hate that. You know, I grew up in this cozy little bungalow from the time I was about 3 until I was 14. It was pretty modest. 3 small bedrooms lined up down a hallway that led right into the living room. We had a finished basement, and there was this one concrete room down there meant for cold storage. Now, that room? It absolutely terrified me as a kid. Whenever the door was left open, I swear I saw shadows, like a figure, maybe human-shaped, just watching me. I was too scared to even get close, and if I did, I'd break down crying. Whenever my parents went down there, I'd stand at the top of the stairs, screaming and pleading with them to stay away from that room and come back upstairs. Upstairs, my bedroom was just across a tiny hallway from my parents'. At night, I refused to walk down that hallway in the dark. My mom told me I used to wake up in the middle of the night, screaming and begging her to come sleep with me so the shadows wouldn't get me. In the living room, while playing or watching TV, I'd catch glimpses out of the corner of my eye of this older couple dressed in clothes that looked like they were from the 1800s. The man wore a top hat and a suit that was shorter in the front and longer in the back, and the woman had on a wide, flowing dress with a corset top. They'd pace slowly back and forth down the hallway, pausing for a few seconds before turning around. But every time I turned my head to get a better look, they vanished. Until we moved when I was 14, I refused to be alone in that house. There was this constant, heavy feeling of being watched that I just couldn't shake. I'd wait out in the backyard for hours until my dad got home from work, just so I wouldn't have to be inside alone. And the moment we moved, all those feelings and my terrible night terrors stopped completely. Fast forward about 10 years. I was having lunch with my mom and her best friend when we started talking about that old house. I told my mom about how creepy it felt growing up there, though I tried to laugh it off as just a kid's wild imagination looking back on it. Then, my mom surprised me. She said she'd felt those same eerie things and had odd experiences there too, but never told me because she didn't want to scare me. She described seeing the same old couple walking down the hallway. We ended up finishing each other's sentences as we described them, and it was almost like we were talking about the exact same pair. She even told me that while I was at school, a priest used to come by every few months to bless the house. I still consider myself a bit of a skeptic, but honestly, it's hard to explain how my mom and I saw the same couple without ever mentioning them to each other. It's one of those childhood mysteries that still makes me pause and wonder. Hi everyone. I'm reaching out because I honestly don't know how to make sense of what has been happening with my mother. This has been building for years now, and it feels like I've been carrying it around quietly for so long that I don't even know where to begin. About 8 years ago, I started having these really vivid dreams that my mother was going to die. At first, I tried to ignore them. I told myself dreams are just dreams. But then they happened again and again, maybe 3 or 4 times, and they felt so real that I got scared. I told my mom about them, but she brushed it off. At the time, she was healthy. She had barely ever been sick in her life, and there was no obvious reason for anyone to be worried. Then, slowly, things started changing. She began having health problems no one could properly explain. Her legs started swelling badly. She lost weight. Her strength began fading. This went on over several years, starting before the pandemic, and then everything seemed to get worse after that. Eventually, she became so weak that she dropped to around 36 kilos and had to spend weeks in intensive care. She was being fed through IV support because normal food just did not seem to help her body recover. We tried everything we could think of: doctors, priests, spiritual people, house cleansing, prayers, all of it. Nothing really changed in any lasting way. After she came home from the hospital, she improved a little physically. She gained some weight back and reached around 45 or 46 kilos. But then a new problem started, and in some ways it has been even harder to live with. Her behavior changed. Over the last couple of years, she has become harsh, angry, and verbally abusive. She goes through huge amounts of soap and wipes every single day. She cleans for hours, washes things repeatedly, and spends money on these items like there is no limit. She refuses to eat properly. She does not take her medicine consistently. Anytime someone asks her about it, she snaps back as if nobody has the right to question her. What makes it more confusing is that around outsiders, she can act completely normal. She hides all of these habits when other people are watching. So from the outside, nobody really sees what we deal with at home. My father does not really confront her. He keeps buying what she asks for and avoids challenging her behavior. I know he may be tired too, but it feels like his silence has allowed everything to keep getting worse. I feel angry at him for that, even though part of me knows this whole situation is probably bigger than him too. I have started pulling away from my mother. I barely interact with her now. And the hardest part is that I used to love being close to her. I used to really love my mom. But now, when I look at her, it feels like the person I knew is gone and someone else is living in her place. Part of me wonders if this is mental illness. Part of me wonders if something spiritual or dark is involved. And part of me is just exhausted and wants to cut her off completely so I can stop feeling trapped in this. She refuses to see psychologists properly. She avoids medication. She will not admit anything is wrong. I feel like I am standing in front of a locked door, knocking until my hands hurt, while the person inside pretends not to hear me. So I'm asking honestly, what can be done in a situation like this? Is this illness, something spiritual, or both? And how do I accept that someone I loved so much now feels like a stranger in my own home? Hey, I want to share a story that's been on my mind for a while. It happened one night when I was about 14, and my little cousin, who's my aunt's oldest kid, around 6 back then, was staying over. It was late, like 1 a.m., and we were both awake in the living room watching TV. Suddenly, I needed to use the bathroom, so I got up. But right before I left, she grabbed my arm so tightly and pleaded with me not to leave her alone. I told her it'd be super quick, just a minute. When I came back, she was hiding under the blanket with tears streaming down her face. She pointed silently at the front window. So I looked outside, but there was nothing there. I sat back down next to her, and eventually, we both fell asleep. The next day, my brother, cousins, and I went to visit my mom and her boyfriend and told them about what happened. They gave us some sage to clear the house. I told them about what my cousin saw, and when my mom's boyfriend gently asked her about it, she just whispered something to him and started crying uncontrollably. We never pushed her to talk about it again because we didn't want to upset her more. She's 10 now, and sometimes I think about asking her if she still remembers. What breaks my heart the most is that she begged me not to leave her alone, but I did anyway, and she had to face whatever it was by herself. Thankfully, we're out of that house now. It's one of those moments that stays with you, you know? I'm a doctor in southern Brazil, and I've worked in the public health system long enough to think I'd built a pretty thick wall around myself. You see a lot in this job. Too much, honestly. You learn to stay calm, to trust the labs, to follow the protocols, to keep your feet planted on the floor even when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. But there was a case last month that still hasn't left me alone. It was a 13-year-old boy. I'll call him Matthias. That wasn't his real name, but it's close enough. He came in with what looked like a textbook case of leptospirosis. High fever, yellowing eyes, muscle pain, weakness, the whole pattern. We ran the tests, confirmed it, and admitted him right away. He was scared, of course. His mother was terrified. But he fought. For a few days, we all thought there was a chance. Then things went bad very quickly. His kidneys started failing. Then came the pulmonary bleeding. We did what we could, but he died. It was awful, but medically speaking, it wasn't impossible to understand. In poorer areas, especially after heavy rain and flooding, leptospirosis can be brutal. Rat urine gets into dirty floodwater. Kids play in it. People walk through it. And sometimes the infection turns deadly. That part, as painful as it was, made sense. What happened afterward is the part I still can't explain. A few days later, his mother came back to the hospital for the death certificate. She looked exhausted in a way I don't think words can really hold. Like grief had hollowed her out and left her walking around by habit. She told me that Matthias had been acting strange for about a week before he got visibly sick. Not just quiet, not just tired. Strange. One afternoon, he sat both of his parents down at the kitchen table and told them, very calmly, "I'm going to die from leptospirosis." They thought he had heard something on the news. Maybe a warning after the floods. Maybe something at school. They told themselves he was being dramatic, the way kids sometimes are when they get frightened by a word they don't fully understand. But then she showed me the drawings. There were 3 of them, all folded and wrinkled, made on notebook paper with crayons and a cheap blue pen. Nothing polished, nothing artistic. Just messy, childish sketches with uneven lines and awkward little figures. Somehow, that made them worse. The first drawing showed a boy standing ankle-deep in a wide puddle of filthy water. He was smiling. Behind a tipped-over garbage bin, there was a little rat peeking out. His mother said he drew it before he had any symptoms. That alone made my chest tighten, because that is exactly how leptospirosis spreads in places like his neighborhood. Floodwater, waste, rats. A dangerous little triangle hiding in plain sight. The second drawing showed him lying in a hospital bed. On one side, there was a doctor with a long white coat and something that looked like a stethoscope. On the other side, there was a nurse. Above the bed, floating near the ceiling, he had drawn this oval shape, almost like a tiny flying saucer, shining a thick beam of yellow light down onto him. It looked like the light was pulling him upward. His mother said he drew that one the night before they brought him in. Then she unfolded the third drawing. I still remember the feeling in my stomach when I saw it. It was a small chapel with a cross on top. There was a narrow window drawn in little colored blocks, like stained glass. Inside, there was a simple altar placed to the left, and a row of benches drawn at an odd angle. It was almost exactly like the small chapel inside our hospital, the one near the mortuary area, the one where bodies are sometimes kept briefly before they're taken by the funeral home. Same little window style, same layout, same strange position of the altar. Matthias had never been taken there. His mother swore he had never even seen that part of the hospital. I wanted to tell myself she was mistaken, that maybe he had passed it during another visit. Maybe someone described it to him. Maybe the drawing was generic and my brain was filling in the gaps. But I was holding that paper in my hand, and it looked like our chapel. Then she showed me the last thing. She opened a notebook where the family had written down passwords and little notes, and tucked inside was the name of the last YouTube video he had watched before he got worse. The song was called Doña Muerte. I looked it up later because I couldn't stop thinking about it. The lyrics were about death coming for a young boy who became ill after the rain. It mentioned a fever burning from the inside, the body failing, the family being left behind. Not in a vague, poetic way either. The progression in the song felt horribly close to what happened to him. His mother said he had played it over and over the day before he told his parents he was going to die. I don't believe in omens. I don't believe in visions. I'm not religious. I'm not someone who sees ghosts in the corners of hospital rooms. I believe in cultures, blood work, imaging, renal panels, oxygen saturation, antibiotics, evidence. That is the ground I stand on. But this shook me, because I can explain one piece. A child hears about leptospirosis during flood season and becomes anxious. Fine, I can explain 2 pieces. Maybe he saw dirty water and rats around his neighborhood and made a drawing because it scared him. Fine, but 3 drawings? The source of infection, the hospital bed, the doctor and nurse, the light above him, the chapel where his body would later be taken. And before any diagnosis, he tells his parents the exact disease that would kill him. Then that song, playing on repeat, describing a sick boy taken after the rain. I keep trying to force it into something rational, Coincidence. Grief reshaping memory. A frightened child absorbing details from adults. A mother, devastated beyond words, connecting dots that maybe weren't really connected. That is probably the answer. That has to be the answer. But when she was sitting across from me, crying quietly and smoothing those crumpled drawings with her hands, it didn't feel like an answer. It felt wrong. Deeply wrong. And I still don't know what to do with it. Hey, I want to share this story from when I was about 11 or 12 years old. It's one of those moments that stuck with me way longer than I expected. So, my two friends and I decided it was a brilliant idea to mess around with a Ouija board. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. A little backstory on the board itself. It belonged to the older sister, Dina, of one of my friends. Apparently, one day when Dina and a friend used it, they didn't say goodbye before putting it away, and whatever was on the other side freaked them out so badly they just shoved the board back in the box without a word. From what I've read since, ending a Ouija session without a proper goodbye can invite something unwanted to stick around, either with you or the board. But of course, we didn't know that then and went ahead with using the same board. My friend Aaron was spending the night at my place, and since we thought we were pretty fearless, we figured, why not? Our other friend Ryan lived just across the street, so we called him over to join us. We started asking if anyone was there, and the planchette spelled out Andra. That's actually my middle name, so that gave me chills, but I thought Aaron was messing around with me. Then it spelled out YoumustRun. Just saying that out loud now still gives me goosebumps. So naturally, we freaked out and tried to end the session properly this time. We ran over to Ryan's house across the street. Behind his place was this empty lot, fenced off with a small chain link fence, and since we were curious, we decided to sneak in and explore a bit. Erin's got this gut feeling about things, and when she said we should leave, I knew we needed to listen. The air felt heavy, tense. We hurried back to the fence, calling Ryan to come back, but he thought we were overreacting. Eventually, we convinced him, and as we were helping him climb back over the fence, because, yeah, we were all a bit chubby and clumsy, something weird happened. Both Aaron and I felt this strong resistance, like an invisible force was pulling Ryan's hood back, and he started gasping for air. It was terrifying. Somehow, we managed to get him over safely, and he just wanted to go inside and forget the whole night. Aaron and I walked back to my house, trying to laugh it off like kids do, but something was off. Because I have trouble sharing a bed, I ended up sleeping on the floor that night. The next morning, I woke up with 3 long, deep scratches on both sides of my waist. It looked like claw marks, but our cat was declawed, so it couldn't have been him. And I definitely didn't scratch myself in my sleep. That was the only time anything like that ever happened. But even now, years later, I still think about that night and wonder what exactly we stirred up by using that board. It was a wild, scary experience that taught me to be a little more careful about what games I choose to play. You know, working as the head social worker at a nursing home has given me a front row seat to some really profound moments. Some heartbreaking, some downright eerie. I want to share 2 stories about residents who, in their own way, predicted their own passing. It's not a spooky ghost story kind of thing, but these experiences have stuck with me. First, there was a resident. Let's call them Jame. Jame was under 60, stayed at our facility for long-term care because their health made living on their own tough. This was during the thick of the COVID-19 pandemic, around December 2020, right before the holidays. Jame seemed stable, no immediate health crises that would suggest they were nearing the end. One day, Jame asked if they could visit their family for Christmas. With all the restrictions in place, sadly, I had to say no. Jame was heartbroken, tears streaming down. I stayed with them, trying to comfort them, and brought in our director of nursing to help soothe their distress. Amidst the sadness, Jame confided something that really stayed with me. They were certain they wouldn't make it to the next Christmas. It felt so final, so real. We reassured Jame, reminding them their condition was stable. There was no medical reason to expect death so soon. But life had other plans, and just 2 weeks later, Jame passed away. It was tragic, and the circumstances were complicated, but that certainty Jame had. It was haunting. Then there's the second story, about another resident. Let's call her Margaret. She was in her 60s, dealing with multiple health issues, but we were optimistic she'd recover enough to return home to her spouse. One day, I overheard a nurse talking nearby, and suddenly, I heard Margaret cry out in distress. I rushed to her room and found her curled up in a fetal position, her face a mask of terror. When I asked what was wrong, she said she heard people just outside her door talking about how she was going to die soon and how they were digging her grave. I was taken aback. There was no one there, no such conversation. The nurse and I had been chatting, but nothing about death or graves. I tried to calm Margaret, assuring her no one was there with those intentions. She eventually settled down, and life seemed to go back to normal. But just days later, Margaret was transferred to the hospital and passed away shortly after. Even now, I can't shake that feeling. What was it Margaret sensed? Were there unseen presences outside her door? I don't have the answers, but these moments remind me how mysterious and fragile life truly is. It's these experiences that stay with the day is done. I've shared a few of my past experiences with the unexplained before, mostly because I believe in talking honestly about what I've lived through. To me, those moments are as real as anything else I know, as real as the fact that blood moves through our veins. The last time something like this happened to me was back in 2005 when I was still young. It scared me badly enough that it stayed with me for years. Eventually, I tucked it away so deeply that I almost forgot about it. Until my mother brought it up again and reminded me of the details. Since then, I've spent a lot of time reading about paranormal encounters. Not just believing everything either. My mom and I actually enjoyed trying to understand the psychology behind these stories and debunking what we could. For years, I never felt that same feeling again. Not until today. We were visiting the Kingston Penitentiary, and for my family, it was supposed to be a respectful trip into the history of our country. The place was built before Canada was even officially Canada, so you can imagine the weight of the stories inside those walls. Before the tour started, we went to the old warden's residence across the street. My wife, my mother, and I had been there before, and the first time I felt nothing strange, nothing heavy, nothing hostile. But today was different. I didn't feel anything walking up the stairs, but the second I stepped through the doorway, something changed. It felt wrong. That's the only word I can really use. Wrong. Unnatural. Like a dark pit had opened somewhere nearby, even though I couldn't see it. At first, I tried to explain it away. I hadn't eaten much. I'd been under stress. Maybe my body was just reacting to that, but the feeling didn't leave. Even after I stepped outside and sat on a bench for a smoke, it stayed over me. It felt like a heavy blanket I couldn't pull off. I felt exposed, raw, completely out of place. I told myself again that it was stress. I talked with my wife and tried to settle myself before we met back up with the rest of the family. Then we entered the penitentiary through the main doors. The building itself was impressive in that old, severe way. Limestone walls, cut generations ago, still standing with this cold confidence. You could feel the age of it. You could imagine the people who had passed through there, day after day, trapped inside that place. That was when the unease became sharper. We stepped into the courtyard. It was wide, clean, and green with grass. Honestly, if you ignored the bars on the windows, you might have mistaken it for an old school or some kind of institution. You would never guess the kind of suffering that had happened there. Then we reached the tour meeting spot. Behind us were two doors, one in front of the other. The first was a massive iron gate, barred like a traditional prison door, towering above us. Behind it stood an old wooden door, worn down by time. I touched the iron gate. The metal was cool, but not freezing. And the moment my hand made contact, this wave came over me. I need to be clear here. I've seen things most people should never have to see. I've lived through trauma. I know what fear feels like. It takes a lot to shake me. But touching that gate did something to me. The hair on the arm I touched it with stood up, even after I pulled my hand away. I felt horror, pain, fear, death. Not as an idea, not as imagination. I felt it as if all of it had passed through that gate and somehow left something behind. From that moment on, I became extremely alert. There were crows, or maybe ravens, overhead. Not gathered together, just appearing one at a time. One flew over after I touched the gate. Another had passed above us before we entered. I had this awful feeling that I wasn't supposed to be there. Like something new, I could sense it. We moved into the main cell block. My mom and stepfather were enjoying themselves. They didn't seem to feel anything at all. And I'm glad they didn't, honestly. There was artwork made by former inmates displayed in that area, but I felt nothing from it. That space felt empty to me. I even touched a few different spots, wondering if maybe the cold metal or the texture of the place had triggered the feeling at the gate. Nothing happened. Then, as we were leaving, we passed one cell with something wrapped around the bars. I couldn't tell what the material was. It looked almost like bandaging. For a second, I thought I felt something there, but it was faint enough that I can't say for sure. The next area was near the canteen, where the 1971 riot took place. Given what happened there, I expected to feel something, but at first I didn't. Then I looked down a hallway. It wasn't very long, maybe 15 meters or so, but when I looked down it, I had the distinct feeling that something was looking back at me. After that, we entered what I understood to be one of the main hub areas of the prison. That was where the fear became overwhelming. I don't mean I was simply nervous. I mean I could feel fear in the space itself. It was enormous, almost too much to stand inside. I couldn't stay there long, so I don't have many observations from that part. My only thought was that I needed to keep moving. Then we entered a secured cell block. There was a laminated sign that said, "Suicide Watch." At first, I felt only a small shift, something quiet and distant. But when I approached cell 16, it came back. Darkness, pain, fear, hurt, loss. Before I even looked inside, I felt it. And when I stepped into the cell, the walls were covered with words. Many of them had faded or deteriorated over time, but one phrase was still clear. Help me. That was it for me. By then, I knew I had to leave. There was nothing else in that building I wanted to see, nothing else I wanted to feel. The only thought in my mind was, leave now. When I finally got out, I didn't take pictures. I didn't want any. The memories in my head were enough. But even outside the penitentiary, the dread didn't leave right away. I felt shaken deep down, in a way I haven't felt in 2 decades. I went in thinking the place was a beautiful historic site with a dark and unfortunate past. I left believing that something about it is deeply, deeply wrong. There is something there. Maybe not a ghost in the way people like to imagine ghosts. Maybe not something with a name or a shape. But there is darkness in that place. Pain, fear, and death have soaked into it somehow. And whatever remains there does not feel like it belongs in this world. I work in a field where I'm expected to see and handle things most people should never be asked to face. There isn't much that frightens me anymore. But that place frightened me. Not because it was old, not because it was a prison, not because I wanted to be scared. It frightened me because it felt wrong. In 2005, I had my first experience with something I couldn't explain. For years, I tried to understand it. I read everything I could, but it was hard to sort through genuine experiences, mental illness, exaggeration, and people claiming abilities they probably didn't have. Today was the first time in over 20 years that the feeling came back. My current theory is personal, and I don't know if I'm right. For most of my life, even from childhood, I didn't really want to live. I didn't want to be here. But recently, through therapy and help, something changed. I chose to live. I chose to actually be present in my own life. And I wonder if that matters. Maybe when we're children, we're open to the world in ways we later shut down. We believe in wonder before pain, stress, and survival teach us to narrow our vision. Maybe we lose the ability to sense certain things because we teach ourselves not to. Today felt like a piece of me had come back, a part I don't fully understand, a part that let me feel something I couldn't see, hear, or prove. I don't know what remains inside Kingston Penitentiary, but I know I will never go back. Whatever is there, whatever energy still lingers from all that pain and horror and death, I don't believe it should be disturbed by the living. Hey, I want to share this story that happened to me a few years back when I was babysitting my dear friend's little boy, who was just about a year old then. We didn't do this all the time, just on those rare date nights when she needed a break. You know, as social workers, we tend to be super careful about who looks after our kids. We've all heard the horror stories, right? So one evening, I was putting her son, whom I'll call Eli, to bed. After some playtime downstairs, we headed upstairs for his bath. Once he was clean, I was drying him off on the bathroom floor, playing peekaboo, when suddenly I heard something downstairs. Their little dog, a tiny yappy thing, started barking wildly. Normally it barks a lot, but this time it just wouldn't stop. At first, I thought maybe my friend or her husband had come home early, but the dog kept barking non-stop, and then I heard a man's voice downstairs, loud and clear, shouting, "Stop barking at that monkey!" And just like that, the dog went silent. I waited, expecting someone to come upstairs, but no one did. That's when a cold shiver ran down my spine. I realized neither my friend nor her husband was home. Panic set in. I grabbed Eli and looked around for a place to hide him safely, but my phone was downstairs. I was trembling, terrified, but I decided I couldn't leave him alone. So clutching him wrapped in his towel, I took a deep breath and bolted downstairs, heart pounding like never before. I grabbed the phone off the counter and sprinted back upstairs. I texted my friend, who said she'd be home in about 20 minutes. I searched the house but found nothing unusual. When she arrived, I told her and her husband everything. They exchanged glances and nodded knowingly. At first, they told me they sometimes call Eli Monkey at bedtime. Then they shared that they think their house is haunted, smelling cigar smoke, things moving or disappearing mysteriously. But the house had never spoken before. I was genuinely shaken. We're still close friends, but you better believe I didn't babysit there again after that night. Hey, I want to share a story about the old farmhouse I grew up in, called the Willow Creek Farmhouse. It was built way back in the 1800s, and my family, my mom, dad, and my brother, lived there until I was about 10. The place was pretty remote, surrounded by woods, and had this really old, creaky garage and a dirt basement with walls made from lead, which always added to the eerie vibe. Now, a bit of history. The house had some dark past, like a woman who was shot behind the garage and someone else who tragically fell down the stairs, breaking their neck. So yeah, spooky stuff. My brother once had a really unsettling experience. He slept upstairs with a window facing the backyard, right above the porch roof. One night, he woke up, pulled back the curtains, and saw a woman waving her arms back and forth on the porch roof. Imagine being a kid and seeing that. Needless to say, he freaked out. My sister, who didn't live with us but often stayed over, had her own run-in one night. She was napping on the living room couch, which was connected to the dining room, and woke up to see a little girl's apparition standing near our computer, just staring at her. She didn't stick around to chat, though. She ran upstairs and hid on top of my bunk bed. My mom? She had the most encounters by far. She's always been very sensitive and connected to the spiritual world. When we started packing up to move out, she felt like the spirits were upset with us. One morning, she woke up to a dark figure standing at the doorway of her room. She said it felt like it stared at her for minutes before suddenly leaping toward her and vanishing into thin air. That moment really stuck with her. What's strange is, growing up there, I never really felt alone, not in the usual sense. It was like the house had its own presence, sometimes comforting, sometimes unsettling. I'm still not sure if that was a good thing or a bad one, but it definitely shaped how I see the world around me. So this happened earlier today, and honestly, I'm still trying to settle my nerves. For some background, my friend has always said this house felt haunted, but nothing there had ever felt cruel or dangerous before. Strange, maybe. Heavy sometimes, but not like what we experienced today. She had also once told us that something seemed to follow her home from a well-known haunted place she visited. We thought it had been dealt with, cleansed, prayed over, whatever you want to call it. We really believed it was gone. My friend, I'll call her Kayla, used to live in this house with her grandparents. Her grandmother passed away, and recently her grandfather had to move out because he couldn't safely live on his own anymore. There was also this awful situation where a man from the neighborhood somehow convinced him to give up the house, which still makes me sick to think about. Anyway, today Kayla needed to stop by to grab some mail and see if there were any personal things left behind. It was me, Kayla, and her boyfriend, who I'll call Aaron. We had been hanging out for a few hours, and then we all drove over together. The moment Aaron and I stepped inside, we both got hit with this intense headache. It felt like pressure, almost like something was squeezing my head from both sides. I also felt pain behind my eyes, like I had been staring at a bright light for too long. Kayla seemed totally fine. She and I went toward the kitchen and dining area to look for the mail, while Aaron wandered through the house because he had this strong feeling that someone had broken in and might be staying there. He checked around, but he didn't find anyone. While we were in the dining room, I kept staring at one corner. I don't even know how to explain it. I didn't want to look at it, but my eyes kept going back there. Even when I forced myself to look away, I could still feel that corner sitting in my peripheral vision, like it was waiting for me to notice it again. After that, we all walked through the house together, checking for furniture or anything Kayla might need to take. Eventually, we reached the back bedroom, which had been her grandmother's room. That was when things got worse. Aaron and I both started feeling really hot. The headaches intensified, and my vision started to feel wrong, almost like it was slipping or blurring around the edges. Aaron got quiet and then told us something that made my stomach drop. He said he didn't remember walking around parts of the house. He said it felt like he blinked and suddenly found himself somewhere else, with no memory of actually getting there. That was enough for me. I walked out of the house because I couldn't handle the feeling anymore. It felt hard to breathe in there, like the air was too thick. As soon as I stepped outside, I felt better. Instantly, the pressure lifted, my breathing eased up, and I felt like myself again. Kayla and Aaron stayed inside a little longer, still looking around. I stood in the front yard, staring through the house, and even from outside, my eyes kept dragging back toward that dining room corner. When they finally came out, we started comparing what we had felt. Aaron and I had both experienced the headaches, the heat, the pressure, and that awful heavy feeling. Kayla said she felt completely normal the entire time. Then I mentioned the corner. That was when Kayla told me there had always been a spirit in the house, and according to her grandmother, it stayed in that corner. Her grandmother used to communicate with it. After that, they drove me home. Aaron still seemed uneasy, so I went inside to grab him some water. When he stepped out of the car, he immediately said he felt better. Then something even stranger happened. Aaron and I were standing near the driver's side of the car, and Kayla was sitting inside on the passenger side. When she got out and walked over to us, both Aaron and I started feeling sick again. The pressure came back. The uneasiness came back. But the second she moved back to the other side of the car, we both felt better again. That was when we started thinking maybe something had attached itself to her. I told her she should go back to the house and tell whatever it was to leave her alone and stay there. She ended up going back with a neighbor. They cleansed the doorway, and Kayla firmly told the spirit it was not welcome near her, her friends, or anywhere outside that house. Later, she called me and said Aaron felt better almost right away. He wasn't afraid to be near her anymore, and that awful feeling seemed to be gone. I still don't know exactly what happened in that house. I don't know if it was the spirit her grandmother knew, something else entirely, or something that had been stirred up because the house was empty and everything there had changed. But I know what I felt. And I know Aaron felt it too. Hey, I've got a story to share that's been on my mind for a while now. So my partner Andy and I moved into this really old cottage, like over 600 years old, in the countryside near the town I grew up in. It was this quirky big place that used to be part of an old hop mill before becoming a home. We had our dog Merlin, a lovable Labrador, and 3 cats with us. From day one, I felt these strange vibes in the front room and upstairs landing, like we were being watched, and those spots always felt colder than the rest of the house. The first night, after moving in, I caught a glimpse of tiny blue lights flickering across the ceiling. Andy saw them too and even filmed them. It was unsettling but also kind of fascinating. Over the years, the activity would come and go in waves. Sometimes things were quiet, then suddenly doors would open by themselves, footsteps would echo on the stairs, and ornaments would mysteriously be moved around. I remember times when I was home alone, and the dog suddenly started growling, staring at the stairs like she sensed something I couldn't see. Once, I even grabbed a knife and the leash, thinking maybe someone had broken in, but there was nothing there. The basement door, tucked under the stairs, would open on its own a lot, and sometimes I'd find our things placed right in front of it. The living room, with its wood paneling and view of the busy road, had this one corner by the window that always felt darker and uneasy. Both Andy and I saw shadowy figures out of the corner of our eyes there. One time, I saw a photo on a table lift a few inches into the air and then gently settle back down. It was like the house had its own secrets. We also heard voices on the upstairs landing, usually male, murmuring in a way we couldn't understand. Electric things would switch off and on by themselves, and our bedroom lamp with a dimmer slider would be bright at 3 a.m., even though it was hard to move the slider accidentally. The bedroom window was another strange spot. It would open by itself, swinging hard even on calm days, and I often felt like someone was standing over me when I slept with the bed under it. After moving the bed, I finally slept better. One of the creepiest moments was when Andy was cycling home at night. From the road, he could see me in the kitchen light, but also saw a light on in an upstairs bedroom we hardly used. Suddenly, the curtains pulled back, and a figure peeked out and waved at him before the curtains closed again. He asked me who was upstairs, but it was just me, and the light was off when we checked. Another night, the slate heart hanging on our bedroom door started lifting by itself, then slammed down so hard the whole door shook. The dog barked wildly, and the cats bolted off the bed. When we opened the door, the hallway was freezing cold and felt overwhelmingly unfriendly, like someone was glaring at us. We ended up spending the night on the couch downstairs. There were so many little odd things, but despite looking into the history, we found no records of deaths or tragedies. The cottage was also in bad shape, damp and isolated, so we were relieved to move out. On our last day, while packing up with Andy's parents, there was this sudden loud crash in the front room, like a metal pan hitting the wall, and we didn't stick around after that. Living there was definitely an experience. It was a mix of spooky and strange, but also memorable in its own way. Thanks for listening to my tale. I want to tell you about something that happened a while back, and honestly, it still unsettles me when I think about it. I was spending the night at a friend's place with a few other people. We'd all been drinking pretty heavily, just hanging out, laughing, having one of those long nights that sort of blur together. At some point near the end of the night, one of my friends, Mason, pulled out this ghost box he had. He was messing with it in private, trying to communicate with something, I guess. I didn't know exactly what happened then, but I could tell afterward that it really got to him. He looked shaken in a way I hadn't seen before. Eventually, everybody passed out, and I was drifting off too. I was still a little drunk, still foggy. Then, all at once, I heard the back door slam. Not creak, not shift, slam. And the thing is, that door was in the laundry room, and I knew it had been locked earlier. So the second I heard it, I snapped fully awake. It felt like every bit of alcohol left my system in an instant. My whole body went cold. You know that feeling when the air changes and your instincts start screaming before your mind catches up? That's exactly what it was like. I could feel that something else was in that house with me. So I got up and started walking toward the laundry room. As I got closer, I heard voices on the other side of the door. At first, I honestly thought maybe more people had shown up, or someone had woken up and gone in there. I grabbed this heavy wooden baton my friend kept near the wall, just in case, and I reached toward the handle. But right before I touched it, the floor creaked under me. The second that happened, everything on the other side went dead silent. And then I heard a woman's voice. Not just any voice either. It sounded like someone I recognized, a girl I'd gone to school with years earlier. Clear as day, she was trying to coax me into opening the door. Calm, familiar, almost gentle. And that's what scared me most, because every part of me felt that whatever was behind that door wanted me to open it. I can't explain it any better than that. It was this deep, primal warning, like every survival instinct in my body had locked in at once. I knew, with absolute certainty that opening that door would have been a terrible mistake. So I started backing away slowly, and the moment I did, something slammed against the door from the inside. At the same time, my friend's dog, Rusty, came running over. He'd been asleep before that, but now he was right beside me, growling at the door and whining at me, almost like he was trying to warn me off. Then he actually started nudging me backward, physically pushing me away from that room. I still get emotional thinking about that part, because in that moment I felt completely trapped. I thought about going out the front door, but it somehow felt like whatever was in that laundry room was also outside, like there was nowhere safe to run. And Rusty would not go near the front. He was determined to keep me inside. So I sat down on the couch, and that dog climbed right into my lap and refused to leave. Every time I tried to move, he'd press his weight against me like he was telling me, "Stay here, don't go anywhere." And while I was sitting there, I could still hear that woman's voice coming from the laundry room. On top of that, both bathroom doors in the hallway kept opening and closing by themselves, over and over. Not dramatically, just enough to make it worse somehow. At one point, I tried to calm myself down by meditating. I thought maybe if I slowed my breathing, I could get control of my fear. But that ended up making everything worse. The second I settled my mind, I could feel that presence even more strongly. It was still in the back room, and whatever it was, it felt hateful, heavy, wrong. Like this concentrated mass of anger and malice just sitting there. And the more aware of it I became, the harder it started pounding on that door. Then suddenly I got this sharp, violent pain in my head. It was so intense it nearly dropped me. It felt instant, like something had struck me from the inside. I almost blacked out. And after that, the strange part was that my sense of the thing changed. I could still tell it was there, but it was like my ability to feel it had been cut off or damaged somehow. After a while, sometime before dawn, the whole atmosphere shifted. The pounding stopped. Rusty finally relaxed, but I was still way too scared to go check that room by myself. The next morning, exhausted and still shaken, I finally found out what Mason had heard from the ghost box the night before. It had said, "We found you." That was the message, and somehow everyone else in the house had slept through the whole night. Nobody heard the door slamming, the pounding, the voices, none of it. I was the only one who experienced any of it. When we finally opened the laundry room, it looked trashed, not a little messy, not like something had fallen over. I mean really tossed around, like someone had gone in there and thrown things everywhere. But the back door was still locked. Then, as we were leaving the room, I noticed a glass bong sitting on the kitchen table had been damaged. It hadn't been shattered, and there wasn't glass everywhere. Instead, the inner chamber had cracked clean through and was just hanging there inside, almost neatly, with no damage on the outside at all. That part bothered me almost as much as everything else, because it made no sense. So that's what happened. And to this day, I still don't know what was in that house with me. I don't know if it was some kind of spirit, something darker, or something I'll never have words for. I just know that whatever it was felt intelligent, it felt hostile, and it absolutely did not want me safe. And ever since that night, the sensitivity I used to have, that ability to feel energy around people and places, has never really come back the same way. It feels dulled now, like something got switched off in me. That's the part I still carry with me most. Not just the fear, but the feeling that whatever happened that night left something behind. I want to tell you about something that happened to me back in October of 2002, when I was 14. Even now, after all these years, I can still see it so clearly. My relatives had just bought this huge old property, something like 500 acres, with a big house sitting in the middle of it. It also had indoor and outdoor horse arenas, which made the place feel even stranger somehow, like it had once been full of life and purpose. The house itself was massive, 4 levels if you counted the basement, and it badly needed work. My family planned to fix it up and rent it out, so we all got pulled in to help clean the place. What struck me the most when I first walked inside was that it didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. The furniture was old, probably late 80s or early 90s, but everything was still in place, like someone had just stepped out for the afternoon and never came back. For a house that had supposedly been empty for years, it felt oddly warm. At one point, my aunt called out from the kitchen and told us girls that if we wanted anything, we should check the daughter's room upstairs. That was all my cousins needed to hear. They tore up the stairs like it was a race, and I followed right behind them. When I walked into that bedroom, I just stopped. There were ribbons, medals, trophies, framed photos, stuffed animals, all these signs of a real person, a girl who had clearly poured herself into the life she was building. I remember turning to my cousins with this confused look on my face, and my older cousin kind of shrugged and said, "It's okay, I'm sure she wouldn't care." But I did care. Or at least, I couldn't stop wondering. I asked what had happened, why everything had been left behind like that. My youngest cousin, whose name I'll change a little here and call Sammy, told me the story. She said the family's daughter had been a talented, competitive horse rider. Her parents had built so much of their life around her passion, the arenas, the land, all of it. Then one day, while she was riding in the outdoor ring, the horse threw her. She fell hard and hit her head on a large rock near the center of the arena. She died suddenly, and after that, her parents couldn't bear to stay. They left almost everything exactly as it was and disappeared from the house. That stayed with me. About a year later, the place had been completely redone. The old wallpaper was gone, the rooms were painted, everything was fresh and updated. It looked beautiful, but to me it still felt like the old house was underneath it somehow, just hidden under layers of paint and polish. Before the house went on the market, Sammy decided to have a sleepover there. Her parents lived a little way down the road, maybe 10 minutes or so, which meant we'd mostly have the place to ourselves. It was just a few girls, nothing wild. My mom drove me up that long gravel drive just after sunset. I still remember the air that night, cold and sharp with that late October smell. Leaves, damp earth, wood smoke somewhere in the distance. The woods around the house were dark and thick, and for the first time I really felt how isolated the place was. After my mom pulled away, I stood there for a second with my bag in my hand, just looking at the house. I hadn't seen it since the cleanup days. It looked brighter now, cleaner, almost elegant. And then I noticed something. At the very top of the house, in the room that had once belonged to the daughter, there was a single lit window. Standing there in front of it was a girl. She looked about our age. She was completely still, just facing out. I remember thinking she must be one of Sammy's friends, someone I hadn't met yet. So I gave her a little wave. She didn't wave back. She just stood there staring, and even from that distance, I could make out this heavy sadness in her face. It was the kind of expression that makes you feel strange right away, even if you can't explain why. I remember thinking, with that kind of sarcastic teenage attitude, well, she seems friendly. So I headed inside. The second I walked in, Sammy was bouncing around in the living room with music playing, and 2 other girls were laughing with her. The house felt loud and normal and full of life. Sammy ran over to hug me, and pretty soon we were all joking around, picking out snacks, arguing over which movie to watch. But after a little while, I realized something that made my stomach drop. The girl from the window wasn't there. So I asked Sammy. I said, "Where's your other friend? Is she okay?" She looked at me like I was speaking another language. "What other friend?" I told her I'd seen a girl upstairs, in the top window, watching me when I got there. And the second I said it, they all laughed. They thought I was trying to scare them. They were completely sure I had made it up. But I hadn't. I knew exactly what I saw. And standing there, in that newly renovated house, with all of them brushing it off, I suddenly didn't feel welcome there anymore. I felt like I had seen someone I wasn't supposed to see. If I had to place it, I'd say this happened about 18 years ago, when I was maybe 6 or 7. It's honestly the moment that kicked open the door for me, the one that got me fascinated with everything strange after that. Ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, all of it. I couldn't get enough. Now, before I get too far into it, I should say this wasn't some horror movie kind of thing. Nothing terrible happened to me or my family before or after, and nobody was hurt. There was definitely a heavy feeling in that house sometimes, but that's tied to some personal stuff I'd rather leave out. What happened that night was just deeply weird. When I was a kid, I was terrible at falling asleep. I'd lie there forever, tossing around, wide awake while the whole house was quiet. A lot of nights I'd eventually give up, head downstairs, and crash on the couch instead. Looking back now, I think I was just one of those kids who was always switched on, always buzzing with energy. Between that and an early bedtime, sleep just didn't come easy. So this one night, I was especially restless. I'd been sitting in bed for what felt like hours in the dark, just staring around my room. I remember it being warm in there, so I'm guessing it was summertime. At some point, I got up, cracked the window open a little to let some air in, then climbed back onto my bed and sat there for a while. After maybe 10 minutes, I finally lay back down. I remember exactly how I was positioned, too. I was on my back, looking toward the foot of the bed, toward the doorway. Then I heard a noise. It was enough to make me lift up a little and pay attention. And then, out of nowhere, I felt something grab my ankle. I can still picture it so clearly. It was a hand, fully wrapped around my ankle, and the only way I've ever been able to describe it is that it looked like a hand covered in a white rubber glove. Not translucent, not shadowy. Solid. Real. I felt it tighten around my leg, and right after that I heard a man's voice, clear as anything, say, "Go to sleep." The tone wasn't loud, but it was irritated, like whoever said it was fed up with me being awake. And then, just like that, it was gone. I watched the hand disappear right in front of me. It didn't run off or pull away. It just vanished. I froze. I lay back down and didn't move for the rest of the night. And no, I definitely didn't sleep. The next morning, I went downstairs and asked my dad if he'd come into my room during the night and told me to go to sleep. He said no. The reason I asked him first was because he worked with his hands and always had those white mechanic gloves around, so my brain was trying hard to make it make sense. After that, I asked my mom, my sister, and my brother. Every one of them said no. When they asked why I wanted to know, I told them what happened. I still remember the way they looked at me, just stunned. They asked if I'd seen a face or a whole person standing there. I told them no. There was no body, no face, nobody in the room at all. Just the hand. I even told my brother it looked kind of like that giant hand character from Super Smash Bros., which was the closest thing my kid brain could compare it to. My brother checked my ankle, and there was a little bruise there. I can't honestly say whether that came from what grabbed me, or if it was already there and I just hadn't noticed. But I can say this. That was the only time anything like that ever happened to me. And even now, After all these years, I can still hear that voice perfectly. I want to tell you about something that happened when I was around 17, back in high school, when I was working at an old community theater. The building had originally been a church, and it had been standing since the late 1800s, so people always said it carried a lot of history in its walls. There were stories about the place, of course. People said two spirits still lingered there. One was supposed to be harmless, almost playful, the kind of presence people talked about with a half smile. The other was someone they called Deacon Dale, and that was the one nobody mentioned lightly. From what I'd heard, he had died sometime in the early 1930s. He was known as a stern, deeply religious man, and people believed he never really left because he still saw the old church as something he needed to watch over. At the time, I was the lead tech for the show, which meant I was usually the first one in the building. Every time I came in, I had to turn on the power myself. To get to the breaker room, I'd enter through the front doors, walk down this narrow hallway, climb a set of stairs to the balcony level, and then cross this open upper section where the tech area sat. The breaker booth was tucked off in the far corner. What made it worse was that the balcony had no proper railing, so one bad step could send you over the edge into the auditorium below. That morning started like every other one. I had my flashlight, and I was making my way through the dark, just focused on getting the building up and running. Everything seemed normal. But when I got within a few feet of the breaker room, the door suddenly flew open. And then I saw it. It looked like this dense black shape rushing straight at me, almost solid, but wrong somehow. I could make out a torso and arms, but no head, no legs, nothing fully human. It lunged at me so fast I didn't even have time to react. The next thing I remember is waking up to one of the other techs calling my name. She had come in after me, and she sounded scared. At first I didn't understand why, until I realized half my body was hanging off the balcony. Most of my left side was dangling over open air above the auditorium floor. Somehow I'd ended up maybe 15 feet away from the breaker room, and I have never known how I got there. I was shaky, dizzy, and completely disoriented. Later, I found out nearly 2 hours had passed. 2 hours, just gone. I had this pounding headache, and my chest and shoulders were sore in a way that felt strangely specific, like someone had shoved me hard. I even had faint reddish marks across the sore spots. When I told a few people what had happened, they didn't hesitate. They were convinced Deacon Dale had attacked me. Some of them even acted uneasy around me afterward, like whatever had happened might have left something behind. Me, I mostly just tried to move on. I finished the day, kept working, and honestly never had another experience like that in the theater again. But that wasn't quite the end of it. A few weeks later, I was with a friend of mine who was really into reading people's energy. I wasn't sure what I believed, but I was curious, so I agreed to let her read mine. The second she put her hands over mine, her expression changed. Her whole face tightened, like she'd touched something that made her instantly uncomfortable. And because I was still a teenager and not nearly as wise as I should have been, I decided to joke around. Without moving at all, just in my mind, I imagined reaching out and touching her wrist. The moment I did, she screamed and jumped back from me. I mean, real fear. The kind that drains all the color out of someone's face. I had never seen her look at anyone like that. For the longest time, she wouldn't tell me what she felt. She just avoided the conversation completely. But eventually, she admitted that when she looked at me, she saw this dark aura around my body, almost like black fire. And when I touched her in my head, she said it felt like being burned with a red-hot iron. After that, she did some kind of protective Wiccan ritual because she didn't want it happening again. For months, she kept her distance from me and watched me with this nervous, guarded look, like she wasn't sure what might happen if I got too close. And that's the strange part. Since then, nothing else paranormal has happened to me. No voices, no shadows, no sudden chills, nothing. Just that one terrifying morning in the theater, and that one strange moment afterward that made me wonder whether something had followed me out, or whether, for just a little while, something had marked me. I want to tell you something that still gives me chills, even now. The apartment complex where I live is pretty old. It was built sometime in the 1970s, and there is this woman I know who has lived here on and off since the 1980s. I mention her because, strangely enough, she ended up being an important part of all this. I have been living in this complex for about 6 years. I started out in a one-bedroom and then moved into the two-bedroom unit where my family and I live now. Nothing ever felt strange in the first apartment. Everything I am about to tell you only started after we moved into this unit. The first odd things happened with my daughter when she was still a baby, maybe around 6 months old. Every so often she would just stop whatever she was doing and stare at a certain spot in the room. At first I thought it was one of those random baby things, but then it kept happening. Before long, she was not just staring, she was smiling at whatever she saw, reaching out, waving, like she was greeting someone. Then, once she started talking, she began saying the name Georgie. Later, as she learned more words, she would actually have little conversations with Georgie. The strange part was that we did not know anyone by that name. A little while later, I had my son, and eventually, he started talking to Georgie too. At the time, I was home with the kids while my husband worked nights. My routine was usually the same. Once the kids were asleep and my husband had left for work, I would take a shower, maybe grab something small to eat, and finally have a quiet moment to myself. One night, though, my son had not been feeling well. He had gotten sick on me earlier, so by the time the house settled down, I really needed that shower. I had just worked shampoo into my hair when I suddenly heard pounding on the bathroom door. Hard, urgent pounding. And then I heard a man's voice, one I knew for certain was not my husband's, saying, very clearly and very frantically, "Go check on your little boy." I cannot fully explain what I felt in that moment, except that it was pure panic. I tore out of the shower without even rinsing off, without even shutting the water off. I ran straight to my kids' room. And when I got there, I heard my baby son choking. He had spit up in his sleep and was struggling to breathe. I was able to clear his airway, and thank God, he was okay. But I still think about what might have happened if I had stayed in that shower even 1 minute longer. Later on, I was talking with that neighbor I mentioned earlier. We were having one of those ordinary conversations about apartments, the kind where you compare cabinets, paint colors, old carpet, things like that. She told me she had once lived right next door to the exact unit I live in now. Then, completely out of nowhere, she asked me, "So, have you met Georgie yet?" I just stared at her. When I asked what she meant, she told me that when the apartments were first built, some of the units had been sold instead of rented. A man named George had bought the one my family lives in now. She said he was an older man, retired, quiet, kind, and loved by just about everyone in the complex. He did little favors for people, looked out for the neighborhood kids, and was the sort of person everyone trusted. She said he had been her favorite neighbor until he passed away sometime in the early 1990s. Then she told me he had lived in my exact apartment. So I told her everything. I told her about my daughter talking to Georgie, about my son doing the same, and about the voice I heard that night in the bathroom. She listened, smiled a little, and said, "That sounds just like him." Even now, every once in a while, there are little things. A faint trace of cologne when no one is there. An appliance switching on or off by itself. The feeling that something moved just at the edge of my vision. And every now and then, my kids still mention Georgie in passing, like he is just part of life. But nothing has ever happened again quite like that night. And honestly, whatever you want to call it, I have never been able to think of it as something bad, because that night, something or someone was watching over my son. So, I need to tell you about something that happened to me tonight, because honestly, I am still trying to make sense of it. A little while ago, I moved my desk down into the basement for the summer. It gets brutally hot where I live, and the basement is way easier to keep cool, so it just made sense. It is unfinished, kind of cluttered, a little damp in that classic basement way, but it has never really bothered me. I have always felt completely fine down there. I am not the kind of person who scares easily, and I definitely do not go around believing in ghosts or anything like that. But tonight rattled me. Genuinely. I was on my computer talking to my friend Mason over Discord. Ever since the pandemic, we have had this habit of chatting with screen share and webcams on. It started as a way to feel a little less isolated back then, and somehow it just stuck. So we are talking like normal, and out of nowhere I hear a voice from one of the rooms beside me. Clear as day. I cannot remember exactly what it said now, but I know I heard someone speak. Not a creak, not the house settling. A voice. It hit me so fast that I immediately thought someone had gotten into the house. I paused the conversation right away, and Mason could tell from my face that something was wrong, because I am usually not exactly the jumpy type. I told him, "Hang on a second, I just heard someone in the next room." He got serious immediately and said he thought he had heard something through my mic too. I told him to stay on the call, and half joking, half not, I said if anything went sideways, he might need to call the cops. So I left the mic on and got up to check. The basement is still in that awkward in-between phase because I have been trying to fix it up. Just yesterday I finished insulating part of it, and I am getting ready to move on to drywall. There is stuff everywhere. Tools, boxes, random supplies. I grabbed this wide push broom to use as a makeshift weapon, because if somebody really was down there, I was not about to walk in empty-handed. As I am moving through the basement, I trip over something, drop a loud swear, and I hear Mason through my speakers asking, "You good?" I yell back, "Yeah, I'm fine." I have these Logitech speakers down there, so I could hear him from pretty much anywhere in the basement. It only took a minute or two to check the whole area, and of course, nobody was there. No one. And if someone had been there, I do not see how they could have left. The basement door closes ridiculously slowly, and if you try to shut it faster, it makes a ton of noise. But when I checked it, it was fully shut and locked. So I tried to talk myself down. I figured maybe some bird outside made a weird noise, and my brain turned it into speech in the middle of conversation. That felt reasonable enough. Weird, sure, but explainable. So I started heading back to my desk. On the way back, I heard Mason ask me whether I liked Final Fantasy VIII. Totally random question, but not impossible for him to ask. So I answered, "That's out of nowhere, but honestly, no." I thought the combat was kind of overcomplicated. 9 though? Loved it. By then, I was sitting back down, thinking everything had settled. And that is when it got worse. A lot worse. Mason suddenly says, "Tell your sister I said hi, by the way." Now, he knows my family well enough. We have been friends a long time, even if our friendship mostly lives online. So at first, I just brushed it off and said something like, "Yeah, sure, next time I see her." Then I teased him a little, made a joke that he had no chance with her anyway, and he laughed and yelled a playful hello through my speakers, like he expected her to hear him. That is when I stopped and said, "Wait, my sister isn't here." And I was not joking. I was alone in the house. It was around 1 in the morning. There was absolutely no reason for her to be there. Mason got confused immediately. He said he had heard me talking to her. Not just heard a voice, heard a conversation. He said the two of us were talking about a 3D print I was working on, and that she said she thought it would come out better if I printed it on its side. I just sat there staring, because none of that had happened. I told him he must have had a video open somewhere, or maybe heard something in the background from somewhere else, because the only thing I had said while I was away from the desk was answering him about Final Fantasy VIII. And then he said, "I never asked you about Final Fantasy VIII." That was the moment where everything in me went cold. He said while I was gone, he thought the voice I heard must have been my sister, and once he heard me talking to her, he relaxed and just waited for me to come back. Meanwhile, I was standing there telling him that conversation never happened. Then we both started doing that ridiculous back and forth where each of us is absolutely convinced the other one is messing with them. But then I asked him, "Did you hear anything I said about Final Fantasy VIII?" And he said no, not a word. He said he was just sitting there waiting for me to finish talking to my sister. That should have been the end of it, maybe just a misunderstanding, except for one detail that made my stomach drop. I asked him, "How did you know I had a 3D printer?" Because I bought one a few weeks ago, and I had not told him. I had not told any of my friends yet, actually. Life has been chaotic, and it just never came up. He said he only mentioned it because he heard me and my sister talking about it. That is the part I cannot explain. At all. So I grabbed my phone, switched Discord over to that, and started walking him around the basement on camera. Then upstairs, then through the whole house, then outside to the driveway so he could see there was only my car there. Nobody else. Nothing weird. No prank. No hidden person. Nothing. Finally, I called my sister directly. She answered, groggy and confused, lying in bed next to her girlfriend, hair a mess, asking me why on earth I was calling so late. She said hi to Mason, and the second he heard her voice, he got even more freaked out, because now he knew for sure she had not been in my house. I told her not to worry about it, that I just needed to make sure she was okay and I would explain later. Then we hung up. After that, Mason and I just kind of sat there in silence for a minute, both trying to process it. Eventually, I told him I thought that was probably our sign to call it a night. We said goodnight, and that was that. But I did not move from my desk for another 10 minutes. I just sat there, staring, trying to line up the facts in a way that made sense. Maybe the first voice was nothing. Fine, I can buy that. Maybe I misheard some sound outside. But how did Mason know about the printer? He could not have known. My sister had been over earlier that day to pick up some tomato seedlings for her and her partner's garden, sure. But we never talked about the printer. Not once. And when I called her later, she was clearly asleep. So if nobody was lying, and I really do not think anyone was, then what exactly happened? Because I know what I heard. I heard a voice in the next room. I heard Mason ask me about Final Fantasy VIII. And I believe he heard me talking to my sister about a 3D print that, somehow, he should not even have known existed. I am not someone who usually questions my own mind like this. I know myself pretty well. But in that moment, sitting alone in the basement, I honestly felt like I might be losing my grip a little. I even told Mason that if he was pulling some elaborate joke, I would take it on the chin, but he needed to stop because I had a lot going on already, and it was not landing right. He swore he was not messing with me. And the worst part is, I believe him. That is what has me so unsettled. Not just the strange pieces on their own, but the fact that none of it feels like a prank. None of it fits the people involved. We are adults, busy, tired, stressed. We barely get enough time to catch up as it is. Why would anyone spend that time building some elaborate scare just to throw me off balance? It does not add up. And that is why I am telling you this now, because I do not even know what I want out of saying it, except maybe to hear someone tell me I am not losing it. Everything about it felt real, and at the same time, impossible. I need to tell you what happened, because I still do not really know what to make of it. A little while back, I told a story about hearing a voice in my basement, and even a friend of mine heard it through Discord. That was creepy enough, but this felt different. This is the first time since moving into this house that I have honestly felt afraid to be here by myself. I live in a quiet neighborhood. It is not perfect, but it is the kind of place where everybody kind of knows everybody. A few of the neighbors can be a little rough around the edges, sure, but I have never truly felt unsafe around them. I have even loaned out tools before, and they always brought them back. So after that earlier weird experience, I told myself not to spiral. I let a couple of neighbors know that if they noticed anything strange around my place, to give me a heads up. Nothing dramatic, just a casual, "Hey, keep an eye out." Then one night, sometime around midnight, the older woman next door texted me. She said, "I just saw a really tall man go into your basement, so I wanted to let you know." At first, I brushed it off. I was literally in the basement at that moment, sitting at my desk, playing a game, completely alone. Nobody had opened the door. Nobody called out. Nothing. So I figured maybe she had seen a shadow, or maybe the darkness was playing tricks on her. About 30 minutes later, she texted me again. This time she said the man had come back out, walked toward the area near my camper, and then just disappeared. She said she tried to keep an eye on him, but he never came out the other side and never circled back. That was the moment my stomach dropped a little. I paused the game and looked around the basement. Nothing was out of place. I had been doing some drywall work, so there was dust all over the floor, little patches of putty, sanding mess, all of that. I could see my own footprints from my Crocs, but there was nothing else. No extra marks, no sign that anyone had walked through there, no stolen tools, nothing. Unless somebody had floated across the room without touching the floor, I was alone. I decided I had had enough, and figured I would just go next door for a bit, talk to her in person, calm myself down, maybe get a clearer idea of what she thought she saw. But when I tried to leave, the basement door would not open. Now, to explain that, the basement entrance is outside the house, and the door has always been a little annoying. It closes slowly, and from the outside, you have to pull it shut properly, then slide the bolt, and if I'm leaving for a while, I use a padlock. But all of that is done from the outside. The lock itself was sitting beside me in the basement, which meant it should have opened easily from where I was. It would not budge. That had never happened before. I have lived in this house since I was a teenager. My parents sold it to me when they retired, and I know how lucky I am for that. In all those years, that door had never jammed like that. So I climbed out through one of the small basement windows instead, went around to check the door from the outside, and it opened completely fine. That was strange enough, but I was still trying to be rational. I went over to talk to my neighbor. She was sitting out like usual, enjoying the night air. She told me she had seen a tall guy dressed in dark clothes walk up to the basement door, pause there for a moment, duck slightly to go in, and then vanish from view. She could not make out his face, just his height and the way he moved. By then, it was probably around 1 in the morning. I stayed a little while, then told her good night and went back inside. I checked the locks, made sure everything upstairs was secured, did all the normal bedtime stuff. I was jittery by then, pacing around the house, picking up little things, half cleaning, half trying not to think too hard. Then I heard this huge bang from downstairs. It was not glass. It was not a creak or a thump from the house settling. It sounded like something heavy had fallen over, or snapped, or broken. So I went back down to the basement, expecting to find a shelf collapsed or a tool knocked over or something. Nothing. Absolutely nothing had changed. And then I tried to leave again. The door was jammed. Not just stuck, jammed. I pulled on it hard enough to break a sweat. I grabbed a long tool and tried to use it for leverage, almost like a pry bar. I put real force into it. Nothing. It was like the door had sealed itself shut. Finally, frustrated and feeling ridiculous, I just said out loud, "All right, I get it. Let me out." And right after that, I reached for my phone to call my neighbor. My phone was dead. Not low, dead. That made no sense. I keep it on a wireless charger at my desk almost constantly. I had only been away from it for a couple of hours. It should have had plenty of battery left. But when I pressed the button, nothing. I put it on the charger and it showed completely drained. So now I am standing in this basement with a door that will not open after hearing something slam downstairs that left no trace, and my fully charged phone is suddenly dead in my hand. I let the phone charge for a while until it had enough power, went back to the door, tried it again, and this time it opened like nothing had ever been wrong. No struggle, no resistance, just opened. I have not wanted to go back down there since. I am serious. I have been jumpy ever since. The air conditioner kicks on and my whole body reacts. A knock at the door sets me off. One of my neighbors came by to borrow a tiller, took one look at me, and asked if I was all right. I told him he had just startled me, but honestly, I must have looked shaken because I was. And on top of all that, I have felt drained. Really drained. I know people always say that in ghost stories, and I used to roll my eyes at it too, but I do not know how else to explain it. I usually stay busy. I work on the house, I run, I mess around in the garden, I keep moving. But after that night, even simple things have felt heavy. That is what has me the most unsettled, honestly. Not just the sounds or the door or the dead phone. It is how deeply this got under my skin. I do not know what happened that night. I just know my basement has never felt the same since, and neither have I. So, for a bit of context, my grandma lives in a downstairs suite. There are 2 rooms down there, and right outside the room where I usually slept was the little living area. When I was really young, maybe around 5, my parents said I used to talk to a little boy I kept seeing in my room. He would be curled up right in the middle of the carpet, almost like he was sleeping. I barely remember it now because I was so little, but apparently it happened often enough that my parents never forgot it. After that age, I stopped seeing him completely, or at least I thought I did. A few years later, when I was around 9 or 10, I was staying at my grandma's house. I walked into the spare room where I slept, holding my mini iPad, and I remember glancing up so I could climb onto the bed without wiping out. But the second I looked up, I froze. Right there at the foot of the bed was the same little boy, curled up in the exact same way, in the fetal position. What made it even stranger was that my dad has always believed in paranormal stuff. Years earlier, I had told him all about the boy I saw in my room and described exactly what he looked like. So when I came running to tell him about the little boy at my grandma's place and described him again, my dad said it matched perfectly with what I'd told him years before. At the time, I was terrified. I ran straight out of the room so fast I nearly slammed face first into the floor. And somewhere in the middle of that sprint, I dropped my iPad. My grandma was in her room nearby, recording voice messages on WeChat, so she had no idea I'd just bolted out of there in full panic. After a minute, I finally calmed myself down enough to go back. Honestly, the only reason I even worked up the courage was because I really wanted to keep watching Markiplier on my iPad. When I stepped back into the room, the boy was gone. Completely gone. I climbed onto the bed anyway, still shaky, and tried to finish the video like everything was normal. The next day, I went home. Then, about 2.5 years later, I was back at my grandma's house again. Some relatives were visiting from China and staying in the spare room for a few weeks. One of them was a girl around my age, maybe 11 or 12, and I was sleeping over so we could have a little sleepover together. We spent the whole day hanging out, and that night, once everyone was in bed and the house had gone quiet, this toddler ride-on toy in the living area suddenly started going off by itself. It began playing music and making all these loud, ridiculous little sound effects. Nobody was out there. Everyone was already in bed. For about 15 seconds, nobody moved because we were all just lying there, hoping it would stop on its own. It did not stop. It kept going, loud and cheerful and completely horrifying in the middle of the night. My grandma, absolute legend that she is, finally got up, walked out there, and took the batteries out. Maybe it was just some weird glitch. Maybe it was that same little boy wanting to play. Or maybe it was my grandpa, who had passed away some time before. I still honestly don't know. It's been a few years since all of that happened, and I still don't like sleeping over at my grandma's place. After those 2 nights, something about that downstairs suite just never felt the same to me. Even now, thinking about it still gives me chills. So, let me tell you about this house we bought. It was built in the 1920s, and from the outside, it has this really charming, almost storybook look to it. It's technically 3 stories, and most of the strange things have happened in the basement, where my girlfriend, Lena, and I stay, though not everything has been limited to that part of the house. The basement is basically its own little apartment. There's a bedroom with 2 walk-in closets, a laundry room, a kitchen, a bathroom, a wine cellar, a maintenance room, and a living area. When we first moved in with her mom, Lena and I had that whole downstairs space to ourselves. And yes, before anyone says it, we do own part of the house too, so nobody needs to crack the basement jokes. Anyway, the very first night after moving in, both of us had night terrors. We each saw what looked like an elderly woman in white walking in front of the bed. It really got under our skin, but we tried to brush it off and tell ourselves it was probably just stress from the move. A few nights later, we were unpacking more stuff in one of the walk-in closets. While we were standing there organizing, both of us heard whispering right by our ears. Lena didn't say anything at first, but I remember asking, "Did you just hear that?" and then trying to repeat the sound out loud. The second I did, she looked at me completely shaken, because it matched exactly what she had heard too. Maybe a month or so later, we started hearing shuffling upstairs. It sounded like someone slowly walking around in slippers. Her mom wasn't home, so my first thought was that someone had gotten in. The place is old, and honestly, I figured it wouldn't be hard for someone to break in if they wanted to. But the alarms hadn't gone off, and neither had the glass break sensors. So I grabbed my handgun and went upstairs to check. When I got near the stairs leading to the 3rd floor, I could hear the shuffling right beside me. It sounded like it was going up the stairs, step by step, and then it just stopped at the top. The same thing happened again the next day. By then, I was pretty convinced something was off in that house. Lena felt it too. We tried looking into the history of the place and the people who had lived there before us, but we never found much. Maybe we weren't searching the right way. I don't know. Another night, Lena and I were in the living room doing dry fire training. It was late, probably around 1 in the morning, and her mom was out of town for the weekend. I'm very serious about firearm safety, so I always check everything multiple times. Make sure the gun is unloaded, the magazines are empty, and all live ammo is in another room before we start. We were just practicing drills, and Lena was timing me, when suddenly, she heard someone whisper right next to her ear. "Be careful." I didn't hear it myself, but when she told me, my heart dropped. My first thought was that someone had broken into the house and was whispering to somebody else nearby. I grabbed her and moved us into another room because that's where my mind went immediately. But once she explained that it sounded like it was right beside her, not coming from outside or down the hall, I calmed down a little. Still, it left both of us rattled. One of the creepiest things that happened to me personally was when I was alone, getting ready to wash dishes. I had my earbuds in, but they were in ambient mode, so I could still hear everything around me. I wasn't even listening to music. Out of nowhere, I heard a deep breath right in my ear. It made me jump so hard I spun around, honestly expecting to see Lena messing with me. But nobody was there. The last big thing happened upstairs while Lena and I were hanging out with her mom and her mom's boyfriend. We were listening to music, relaxing, having a couple drinks. I had set a glass of water on a small table beside me. Then, right in front of all of us, the glass tipped over by itself. What made it so strange was the way it happened. It didn't slide off the table or wobble around first. It just tipped over cleanly onto the table like something had pushed it. Afterward, I got up and tried everything I could think of to recreate it. I stomped near the table, bumped it, nudged the glass, even hit the table lightly with my knee and elbow. Nothing made it fall the same way. Everybody saw it, and nobody thought I had touched it. As far as I know, that's everything that's happened so far. We kept trying to tell Lena's mom about all the weird stuff before that, but she always brushed it off. The night the glass tipped over was the first time she really stopped dismissing it. It's possible she's had her own experiences and just hasn't told us. Or maybe there's some explanation for all of it that we just haven't figured out yet. I honestly don't know what to make of it. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's something. But living there, feeling it for yourself, it's really hard to believe it's all just in your head. So, my husband and I had just bought our first house, and it honestly felt like stepping into another lifetime. We were living in this tiny historic town in southern Michigan, in an old Victorian built in 1901. The kind of house that creaks and settles and makes you feel like it's seen 100 different lives before yours. A few months after we moved in, a brutal ice storm rolled through the Midwest, and the whole town lost power. Everything was completely black. No porch lights, no street lights, nothing. Just this eerie, heavy darkness. My husband's cousin, I'll call her Mara, lives across the street and a few houses down from us. Our house sits up on a hill, so from the second-floor bedroom, you can see straight down her long, sloping street. That night, Mara was home alone because her kids were with their dad, and she texted me saying she felt really unsettled sitting there in the dark by herself. So my husband said he'd go get her and bring her back to our place. Now, one of his hobbies is collecting these high-end remote control cars, and a few of them have these surprisingly bright headlights. Since the whole neighborhood was pitch black, he took one with him and walked it along beside him like this tiny glowing escort. The kids and I were upstairs watching from the bedroom window, laughing because the little car was lighting up the street in the weirdest, most ridiculous way. And then, I saw something that made the whole mood change instantly. As he got across the street, I noticed the shadow of a tall, slender man walking near him. He was a few steps behind my husband, but clearly there. Not vague, not maybe, Not sort of. I saw him. I remember saying to my kids, "Who's that walking with Dad?" My husband passed behind this huge tree for a second, and my daughter looked at me and said, "What guy?" So I told her, "Wait, just wait till he comes out from behind the tree. You'll see him." A second later, my husband came back into view, and then right after him, there he was again. The same man. Tall, lean, unmistakable. I looked at my daughter and said, "See, there he is." And she said, "Oh, yeah, who is that?" That's the part that has stayed with me, because for that brief moment, it wasn't just me. She saw him too. We stood there, watching the two of them move down the street together, trying to figure out who this could possibly be. We had only recently moved there from over an hour away, and we didn't know anyone yet besides Mara and her kids. I remember trying to make it make sense. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe somebody had come outside because of the outage. Maybe they were curious about the RC car. My husband came back with Mara. We all talked for a while, and eventually the night settled down. Nothing dramatic, nothing strange, at least not on the surface. But when we were getting ready for bed, I remembered the man and casually asked, "By the way, who was walking with you?" He looked at me completely confused and said, Mara?" And I said, "No, before that, on your way to her house, the tall guy behind you." He just stared at me. Then he said, very slowly, "Nobody was walking with me." I kept trying to describe him. I even compared him to one of my husband's friends who has a similar build. But my husband was adamant. The street was silent, the power was out, and if someone had been that close behind him, he said he absolutely would have heard or sensed it. But I know what I saw. I still know what I saw. And then the next morning, maybe 6 hours later, I woke up early and was just lying there, looking out the same bedroom window. Everything was still, frozen, gray. Then out of nowhere, the tree my husband had passed under the night before started making this awful cracking sound. It split. A massive limb came crashing down exactly where he had walked just hours earlier. The ice had gotten too heavy, and the branch finally gave way. It was enormous. Not the kind of thing you shrug off. The kind of thing that could have killed someone instantly if they'd been underneath it. And I just sat there staring, with this cold feeling washing over me, because I couldn't stop thinking about that figure. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was some trick of light and shadow, my mind filling in shapes in the dark. But it didn't feel like nothing. And the fact that my daughter saw him too has never left me. I can't prove what I saw that night. I know how it sounds. But a part of me still believes that something, or someone, was walking with my husband. Not following him, not haunting him, walking with him. And maybe, just maybe, making sure he got past that tree before it was too late. Before I tell you what happened that night, you need to know how close I was to my grandmother. She lived just across the yard from us, and from the time I was little, I always wanted to be with her and my granddad. Their place felt like home in a way nothing else ever quite did. My granddad passed away in 2012. By then, I was already living with my grandparents because things at home had become difficult after my mom remarried. So for a long time, my grandmother was more than just my grandma. She was comfort, stability, and love. She helped hold me together. Then in January of 2020, we lost her suddenly. It all happened so fast. She'd had this strange cough and wheeze for several days, and right before she finally agreed to let my aunt take her to the hospital, she called out my aunt's name, stared off into space, and collapsed in the bathroom. My aunt caught her, but that was it. It was one of those moments that never leaves you. And at the time, I thought that loss alone was more than enough for 1 year. I had no idea worse was still coming. By then, my own life was already in chaos. I'd moved out, gotten married, and started building a life with my husband and kids. But the house we were living in turned out to have black mold. We lost nearly everything, including belongings we couldn't replace and the home business we were trying to keep afloat. We ended up living in a motorhome for a while, parking wherever we could and just trying to survive. Even after my grandmother died, I never felt like she was fully gone. She had helped me raise my first 3 children, twin boys and their little sister, in those early years before I moved out. She knew me as a mother before I even really knew myself. After she passed, I still felt her around me all the time. Sometimes I'd hear her in this way I can't fully explain. Not exactly in my ears, not exactly in my thoughts either. It was more like something between my mind and my heart. I'd be handling the kids or going through something ordinary, and I'd suddenly know exactly what she would have said. Then came October of that same year. I dreamed about her often after she died, but the dreams were always gentle. It always felt like she was just stopping by to see me. That night started out the same way. Peaceful, familiar, safe. And then it changed. Everything in the dream suddenly went dark. Not just dim, but black, heavy, terrifying. Then her face came right up to mine, and she was screaming at the top of her lungs. It shocked me so badly that I got stuck in sleep paralysis for a moment. I've dealt with sleep paralysis for years, so I knew how to fight my way out of it, and I managed to wake up. The second I did, my phone rang once. Just once. When I looked at it, I saw I had a voicemail from my mom. It was around 4 in the morning. I listened, and all I could hear was my brother screaming, "I'm so sorry," over and over. My mom was trying to comfort him, and he kept saying, "Mom, please don't touch me right now." There were other voices in the background too, strangers maybe, and the whole thing felt unreal. I hung up and called her back immediately. She told me to get to the hospital right away and meet my brother and sister there. She couldn't leave yet. Then she told me what had happened. My brother had come over to spend the night with his 2 children, his baby and his 4-year-old daughter. He was exhausted. He had recently become a single dad, and he was trying to manage work, a newborn, and his little girl, who was autistic, nonverbal, and full of energy. She was the kind of child who could get into anything in just seconds. That night, he had fallen asleep with the kids in the living room. My mom woke up sometime after 3 a.m. to the sound of him outside, screaming for his daughter. The house was in chaos. And without even thinking, my mom ran straight to my grandmother's pool. That's where she found her. She was in the water, close to the steps, in a place where it seemed like she should have been able to stand. We never understood exactly how it happened. The gate lock was gone and was never found. We assumed it must have fallen into the pool. No one has even drained it since. My mom can't bear it. She was the one who opened that gate and pulled her granddaughter out. My family had experience with emergencies. My mom had worked in childcare for years, and my grandmother had run an assisted living home for decades. We all knew CPR. We all knew what to do in a crisis. My mom tried everything she knew. Everything. But she couldn't bring her back. That loss shattered all of us. Since then, we moved closer to my mom, near my grandmother's old house. The pool is still there, untouched. My mom can't bring herself to clean it up or change anything. The trauma of that night is still wrapped around everything. I did talk to a psychiatrist about all of this eventually. He told me that what I believe is probably a coping mechanism, something the mind does when you've had a deep bond with someone you've lost. He said it makes sense that I would feel my grandmother's presence because of how close we were. but I know what I experienced. I know what I felt. And I believe with everything in me that my grandmother, my Nana, woke me up that night. I believe she was trying to prepare me before the call came. People can explain it however they want. They can call it grief, trauma, memory, whatever makes sense to them. But to me, it was her. Our bond didn't end when she died. And that night, I truly believe she reached through whatever separates this world from the next, just to wake me up. Ever since I was about 5, maybe 6, I've had these strange visions. And when I say strange, I really mean it. They never came randomly. They always showed up at very specific moments, triggered by very specific things, and each one was incredibly vivid. What made it even more unsettling was that I could never tell what I was seeing. Were these glimpses of the past? The present? The future? I honestly still don't know. I can't remember the exact day the first vision happened, but I remember the image itself so clearly. I was just a little kid, probably doing whatever 7-year-olds do without thinking twice, when suddenly this place flashed into my mind. It looked like a rectangular underground room. The walls were covered in reddish-brown stone tiles, arranged almost like a checkerboard. The floor was pale, smooth, dusty, and made of stone too. Near the top of one wall, there were these narrow rectangular windows where sunlight streamed in, and through them I could see patches of grass, which made it feel like the room was partly buried beneath the ground. Under those windows stood a row of tall black metal units, dusty and silent, with wires and little pins across the front. Looking back now, they remind me a lot of servers. Dust floated everywhere in the air, glowing in the light. At that age, I didn't think much of it. I just moved on. But after that, the image kept returning, and eventually, it wasn't the only one. Another vision showed me a wide, grassy clearing surrounded by thick forest. A dirt path ran through it, nearly swallowed up by weeds and overgrowth. Just off to the left of the trail were 2 strange glass spheres, each enclosed in a rounded metal framework. Each one had a metal door with a valve on it, facing the path. They were raised on square platforms, made of something I still can't identify, and each platform had a tiny staircase, only a few steps, leading down to the grass. The trail climbed a small hill toward a white rectangular structure with a sign on top that I could never read. And farther behind that, on another hill, there was something like a house, though I never knew for sure what it was. In those earlier visions, the sky was bright blue with soft white clouds. The other recurring image was simpler, but somehow heavier. It was just an abandoned building in the middle of the woods, seen at sunset as the sky was starting to darken. That one changed something in me. After that, every time the visions came, I felt this deep unease. It was the feeling of being watched, the feeling of stepping into a mystery that didn't want to be solved. And underneath it all was this quiet, sickening sense that something terrible had happened there. The visions kept coming and going, but one day the room appeared again, and it wasn't the same anymore. The dust was gone. The warm light was gone too. Everything was darker now, colder. Rain tapped against the windows, and the whole place felt dead. And then I saw it. There was this shape in the darkness, like a black burn mark on a screen, except it had 2 white points staring straight at me. It didn't look human, not really, but it felt aware. It felt like it saw me. That thing terrified me. I can't explain it any better than that. Just looking at it filled me with dread, and I'd feel physically cold afterward. From then on, I started fearing the visions, especially the possibility of seeing that thing again. As I got older, the visions faded for a while. Around the middle of elementary school, they became less frequent. But then, when I was in 8th grade, they returned. This time I saw a cramped, shadowy room made of gray concrete with a white desk against the wall. Sitting on the desk were 2 monitors showing what looked like lines of code. On one side of the room was a window, the kind you'd expect in an observation room, and on the wall behind the desk, there was a strange symbol with an acronym underneath it that I couldn't remember no matter how hard I tried. I remember staring at it, feeling like it meant something important, something I should have recognized. I also saw a hallway. It was dark, lit only by a flashlight beam. The walls were white, the floor dark gray, and at the end of the corridor, there was another wall with 2 branching passageways, one turning left and the other right, both disappearing into darkness. And even the vision of those glass spheres had changed. The blue sky was gone. Now everything above them was covered in thick gray clouds. I still remember this one morning from when I was in elementary school. I cannot tell you my exact age, but I was young enough that getting ready for school still felt automatic, like I was just moving through the motions. My mom had already left for work before I woke up, which was normal back then since she was raising me on her own. I got dressed, made my breakfast, and sat down at the table to eat. We were living in a small trailer at the time, the kind with a narrow hallway running straight through it, with the bedrooms branching off. From where I was sitting, I could look directly down that hallway toward my room. Out of nowhere, I heard this loud bang come from inside my bedroom. It startled me so badly that I froze for a second. My first thought was that maybe my lava lamp had fallen over or something like that, so I started to stand up and go check. But before I could even get fully out of my chair, I saw something move. Something big, dark, fast. It shot out of my room, slammed into the wall across from the doorway, and for a split second, it almost seemed to flash or burst into this round glow before it disappeared back into the wall. I just stood there staring down the hallway, trying to make sense of what I had seen, trying to tell myself there had to be some normal explanation. Then my phone rang and snapped me out of it. It was my cousin calling about something completely unrelated, just a regular conversation, but the timing of it jolted me back to reality. Afterward, I went into my room to check, and nothing was out of place. Nothing had fallen. Nothing looked disturbed. I could never figure out what made that noise. Not long after that, I had another experience in the same room, and this one was shorter but just as strange. I was in there with my cat Milo, and I opened my closet door. The second I did, this shadowy shape, almost like the outline of a cat, lunged at me from the hanging clothes. It vanished before it could reach me. My cat immediately turned and started staring into the closet like he was trying to figure something out, but I honestly do not know if he saw anything or if he was just reacting to me. The one that stayed with me the most happened a few years later, in a different room. I had what I still call a dream, even now, because I cannot prove it was anything else. But in it, I woke up and saw the silhouette of a woman standing at the foot of my bed. The only reason I could make out her shape at all was because of the moonlight coming through the window. She had her hands around my ankles, pinning them down, and she was staring at me. I could not make out her face, just the outline of her body and the feeling of her being there. I do not remember being able to move much. I just remember feeling terrified, and then at some point, I must have fallen back asleep. I never felt physical pressure exactly, which is part of why I have always wondered if it was sleep paralysis. What made all of this harder to brush off was the stuff my family had heard over the years. My mom once told me that the first night she moved into that area with my dad, the two of them heard what she described as slow drumming outside, like ceremonial drums, getting closer and louder in the dark. One of her friend's kids also used to say he saw a native man standing at the tree line, just watching. I grew up in central Maine, and people in the area used to talk about there being native burial ground somewhere within a mile of our house. I never found proof of that myself, even though I spent a lot of time in those woods. The closest thing I ever saw were a few half-buried stones deeper in the trees, maybe half a mile out, but they did not look arranged in any obvious way. I also used to have incredibly vivid dreams when I was younger, the kind that felt too real and stayed with me all day. I do not get them nearly as often now, but back then it felt like the line between dreaming and waking was thinner than it should have been. Even now, I cannot tell you exactly what I saw. Maybe some of it had an explanation, maybe all of it did. But at the time, living through it, it felt real. And honestly, part of me still is not sure what to make of any of it. I want to tell you about something that happened when I went through the Army's Sapper Leader course, because I still think about it. I ended up getting injured and washing out before I could finish, which was hard to take, but I'm hoping to heal up and give it another shot. Still, while I was there, one night happened that I don't think I'll ever forget. Sapper School is a brutal course. It's split into two phases. The first part is usually called General Subjects, and that's where they put you through all the technical engineer tasks. You're working with demolitions, small boat operations, climbing and rope systems, all that kind of thing. You do get some sleep, and you do get fed, but never quite enough of either. The second phase is where things really start to come apart. That part is patrolling. If you make it through phase 1, you head out into the woods, deep in the Mark Twain National Forest, and spend your days and nights moving like a dismounted engineer platoon on combat missions. By then, everyone's running on fumes. Most nights we were getting maybe 2 hours of sleep, sometimes less, and barely enough food to keep going. When you're that worn down, your mind starts doing strange things. You catch movement in the corner of your eye. You think you see people who aren't there. Most of the time, it's easy enough to blame exhaustion, stress, or your body just starting to fail in small ways. But this felt different. It was sometime around 2 in the morning. We had just finished a raid and climbed what felt like an endless hill to get back into position. Everybody was smoked. It was completely dark, and we were all using night vision that worked to varying degrees, which honestly made everything feel even stranger. We went through the usual steps to set up a patrol base, getting security out, and settling into that defensive triangle in the trees. That's when I noticed the buildings. They were sitting out there in the darkness like they belonged there. Not one or two vague shapes either, actual structures. To me, they looked like the kind of plywood huts you'd see on an old army outpost, those temporary barracks-style buildings. I remember thinking it was odd, because patrol bases are supposed to be tucked away from roads and from anything man-made. But I was so exhausted I didn't stop to question it. I just dropped my ruck near one of them and focused on making it through the night. A while later, after another mission, we came back to the same patrol base. I found my gear again by using that same building as a landmark. I remember it clearly. I put my stuff down, got situated for what little rest we had left, and went to sleep. Then morning came. At first light, I sat up and looked around, and there was nothing there. No huts, no buildings, no outlines, just a cluster of worn-out soldiers lying in the woods exactly where we had bedded down. I didn't say anything right away. Honestly, I figured my brain had just glitched from exhaustion. But later that morning, while we were moving, my buddy leaned toward me and spoke quietly. He said, "Hey, did you see buildings in the patrol base last night?" And I looked at him and said, "Yeah, I did." He asked what they looked like, and I told him they looked like army huts. He just stared at me for a second and said, That's exactly what I saw. Then he told me he had used one of those same buildings to find his gear when we got back from the second raid. And I told him I had too. That was the part that got me. Later, once we were back in a place where people could actually talk without worrying about noise discipline, my buddy asked the whole group if anyone else had seen buildings in the patrol base the night before. A bunch of hands went up. Not just one or two, several. Maybe a third of the group. Then I asked if they had looked like those same army-style huts. And again, people nodded. A few said yes out loud. I still can't explain that. Maybe it was nothing more than a shared hallucination from exhaustion, hunger, and stress. Maybe a bunch of half-starved, sleep-deprived guys saw the same thing because our brains were all breaking in the same direction. That's possible, but I don't know. There was something unsettling about how specific it was, how many of us saw it, and how similar the details were. I'm not trying to turn it into a ghost story. I'm not saying I know what happened. Maybe it was just one of those strange things that lives somewhere between memory, stress, and the dark. But whatever it was, it felt real in that moment, and I know I'm never going to forget it.